Having read the proposition before the adjournment, obviously the Deputy Greffier has had to go away for a rest. And so we now proceed to move the proposition. Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. So in a world of instability and within an ever-changing and uncertain global context, this government plan serves as a prudent and solid base for the island. When we look elsewhere, we see countries and jurisdictions who are having to raise taxes to pay for services or make cuts to services or both. And we see many of our neighbours and friends across the world funding their everyday services through borrowing and debt. We are in a strong position here, but we cannot and we will not take that position for granted. The outlook for our economy is positive and our public finances are robust, but we are operating within numerous negative macroeconomic pressures which we must be conscious of at all times. This is a funded, balanced and targeted government plan. It aims to assist Jersey families with meeting their priorities and their ambitions for the future. It is a government plan that is on the side of hard-working islanders. This government plan is prudent in how it raises and allocates public money and ensures we are making the most efficient use of that money, of taxpayers' money, prioritising areas where government support is needed most within our community. It continues to support islanders through the tax system, helping with the cost of living and supporting our ambition for Jersey to remain a competitive, low-tax jurisdiction. It supports first-time buyers into home ownership as we continue to focus on the housing crisis we inherited in a sustainable and appropriate manner. It invests sensibly in our public services with more money for health, education and our island infrastructure. And it supports sectors across the economy, both traditional and emerging, because this is a government plan that looks to both the immediate and the long-term future, an approach which has been the foundation of Jersey's success. Hopefully, by now, sir, members are used to hearing me say that my ambition is for Jersey to be a community where everyone can thrive. I've not stopped saying it since I came into office, and I won't stop. It summarises my ambition for Jersey and for everyone who lives here. For Jersey to be a place where people can thrive requires us to create opportunity, to provide islanders with a platform to utilise and develop their talents, to be there when they need our help, and to be an enabler to innovation. The government plan is another step on that journey, and it builds on this Council of Ministers' commitment to the well-being and prosperity of our whole island community. This plan builds on the foundations laid out in our mini-budget last autumn and in the previous government plan to support islanders through the cost of living crisis, keeping money in their pockets and keeping taxes down. To continue that support, we are once again raising tax thresholds, meaning that islanders can earn more money before they start paying tax. For individuals, they will pay no tax on their first £20,000 of income. The threshold for married couples and civil partners increases to £32,050 and for second earners to £7,950. We are a government that recognises and values the importance of the family. So we are also raising the child allowance to £3,700 and increasing additional child allowances to £5,550. Childcare tax relief to £7,600 and higher childcare relief to £19,700. These threshold increases are a natural decision for ministers, reflecting our philosophy and our policy that individuals and families know best how to spend their own money and should be supported as far as possible to do so. But again, we don't take it for granted that we are able to act and support islanders in this way. In other jurisdictions, thresholds have remained frozen for several years, and not all governments have the headroom to continue ensuring that they can rise year on year. It's because of our strong fiscal position that we are able to support islanders in this way. In 2023, we froze road fuel duty and alcohol duty, supporting islanders and businesses. For next year, we proposed an inflation increase for road fuel duty and below inflation increases for alcohol duties. The government plan process allows a good amount of time for review, scrutiny and amendment. The government always seeks to engage with that process openly and to accept recommendations and amendments where we can, and where we believe that they are affordable and consistent with our objectives. Ministers are grateful for the amendment by the Economic and International Affairs Panel in respect of road fuel duty and alcohol duty. Inflation remains high at 10.1% for Q3, and islanders are still finding it expensive at the pumps. Fuel prices affect everyone in some way. We have therefore accepted the amendment of the panel to freeze road fuel duty for a further year, something which I know has genuinely pleased the Treasury Minister in particular. And I'm sure this move will be welcomed more broadly by road users across the island. In respect of alcohol duty, we're proposing an amendment to the panel's amendment to freeze the duty and have sought to meet at the halfway house with a 4.5% increase. The Minister for Sustainable Economic Development has been a consistent voice for the hospitality sector around the Council of Ministers table, arguing for lower duty increases in order to support hospitality businesses. We also need to have regard for the health impacts of alcohol consumption and the relatively high level of drinking in Jersey, something that we mustn't hide away from. We therefore believe that our approach to alcohol duty reflects the economical and societal realities we are facing and meets the overall interests of islanders. We're grateful to the Economic Affairs Panel for encouraging us to have a rethink on these duty increases and for showing the benefit of scrutiny when it acts as a critical friend. Working together, our plan reflects a government and an assembly that is on the side of hard-working islanders, helping individuals and families through these turbulent and difficult global economic times. We know that housing remains a high priority for islanders, and solving the crisis is the key to unlocking many of the solutions to the challenges that we face. Housing remains a key part of our government programme and one of our main areas of focus. It is not an issue that is easy to address. We're criticised in some quarters for not doing enough and criticised in others for taking action that has allegedly stifled the market. Global conditions are also, of course, having an impact, notably on the feasibility of borrowing. A balance is therefore required, and a sensible approach is needed. There are no easy answers, and actions usually have knock-on consequences. We're trying to ensure that our actions have the right consequences for working families. That's why we're reinvigorating the assisted purchase scheme to make home ownership a reality for a greater number of first-time buyers in these tough times. We're also investing in our surface water and foul sewage drainage network, both necessary as part of our need to deliver more homes. This plan provides an initial £15.6 million for the project in 2024 and 25. And we're increasing the first-time buyer stamp duty threshold to £700,000, easing the financial burden of getting onto the property ladder. So, as I've mentioned, this plan invests both now and for the future. Ministers are determined to address the challenges we're facing in health, in recruitment and retention, the delivery of care and the facilities in which our health staff work. We have not and we will not shy away from the ongoing challenges we face. We know that health spending needs to be controlled so that more money goes into the front line. That's why the turnaround team have been tasked with delivering a financial recovery plan that will deliver £25 million of efficiencies by 2025, not cuts, but redirecting money that is currently being wasted due to poor recruitment processes, to inefficient processes, and channeling that back into frontline services that benefit patients. In the meantime, sir, we are demonstrating that we will stand by our hard-working frontline staff and ensure that islanders can continue to access the services they need. Health spending in this government plan is up by £38 million to £287 million, with funding provided as well to meet the financial structural deficits whilst the financial recovery plan is achieved. We're also continuing our work to deliver the new healthcare facilities we desperately need, taking a phased approach to spread the financial risk and maximise the benefit to our local economy. Similarly, the government plan provides more investment across various critical public services. This is money for Montalabé School, Lisquet Youth Club, and for the additional specialist children's homes. The Education Reform Programme will continue to support improved services for all children and young people, and the Free School Meals project will be expanded. We are also maintaining the 1% commitment for spending on the arts, heritage and culture, including funding the renovation of the Opera House. Importantly, the government plan supports our economy at a time when many businesses are still battling the ongoing impacts caused by global instability and rising costs. Following the agreement of P74, we're providing an additional £3 million of support to the agriculture and fishing industries and making £10 million available to the Agricultural Loans Fund. These industries are not only important economically, they're a way of life for a great many islanders and shape the community and the environment which we all enjoy. We're also proposing tax incentives to encourage greater innovation and technology-based enterprises through investing in the Impact Jersey scheme. Ministers, and I know many backbenchers, are proud of our economic sectors and who we are as an island. The government will continue to stand by the economy to support it and promote it both locally and internationally. So I referenced that our current spending is all funded and not based on debt. This is a good position to be in. Borrowing, of course, part of how a government should support its programme of investment. This government is committed to keeping borrowing down, having been in the enviable position to have repaid our COVID debt. Borrowing can be a tool for delivering improvements to the public realm and public infrastructure projects, which is why this plan seeks an additional £52 million of borrowing for the new healthcare facilities. Further borrowing will, of course, be required for our new healthcare facilities, although I remain confident that by adopting a phased approach, we will proceed only with those projects once we're certain that they're affordable. But we mustn't forget the roots of our success as a stable, well-run and historically prudent jurisdiction. This is a hard-earned reputation which won't be assisted by runaway levels of debt caused by profligate spending. It's important that some control is exercised, and under this government and this Treasury Minister, prudence and value for money are back in play. This takes me, sir, to the ongoing value of our state's funds. The Strategic Reserve currently holds just over £1 billion and is forecast to have a value of just over £1.2 billion at the end of this plan. The Social Security Reserve Fund currently holds £2 billion, which is forecast to increase to £2.5 billion by the end of the plan. In total, the value of states funds stand at £3.5 billion in 2024 and are forecast to increase to £4 billion by 2027. Whilst we must all recognise that these are forecasts in uncertain times, islanders can nevertheless be reassured by these healthy figures and the ongoing sound management of our investment assets over the long term, which set Jersey aside as a jurisdiction of stability. Sir, our policy of cutting taxes for the majority of islanders, investing in public services and starting to deliver on health, education and housing will only be possible on an ongoing basis if we deliver value for money for islanders. That is why all ministers are committed to delivering value for money in our public services, striving for continuous improvement, delivering tangible efficiencies and improving productivity. It's a programme that aims to deliver £40 million of efficiencies by 2026. That's £40 million in a budget which is now over £1 billion. This is eminently achievable and provides money which we can reinvest where it's needed most. We also recognise the need to prioritise our programme of work, so we are focusing on what matters most to the public. It's easy to take on more and more work and add ever more ambitions to our list of priorities. But that doesn't necessarily help islanders in resolving the main challenges that they're facing on a daily basis. This prioritisation isn't about cutting services, it's about being truly focused and more efficient in our work. As I've said before, the States doesn't necessarily need fewer people, it just needs more people delivering more of what matters to the public, and that is what this plan delivers. I've already touched on one of the amendments which we're accepting and where we're proposing meeting the panel halfway on duty changes. We've accepted or reached agreement on a number of amendments and the plan is being proposed accordingly. It has been. Our aim is always to work with backbenchers where possible. We are, however, opposing a number of amendments and we believe are not in the best interests overall of islanders. Some amendments seek to alter the nature of our tax system, which is based on the principles of being low, broad, simple and fair. And clearly the government cannot accept proposals that undermine a long-standing core pillar of our success. We are not a government that wants to increase taxes. We also oppose these proposals which seek to extend the perception that we can continue providing more and more services for free. Government doesn't provide anything for free. It is always funded, one way or another, by taxpayers' money. We cannot continue to support incremental blanket extensions of free services without proper means testing. If there is a case for certain services to be provided for free at the point of use, then that needs to be considered in whole with proper consultation and a balanced consideration of the benefits and the costs. The current bite and hold approach needs to end. The great thing about democracy here in Jersey, sir, is that the government is not a majority. So we need to make our arguments and convince backbenchers to support our approach. That is what we will do throughout the debates, and I look forward to a good-spirited and robust discussion. The decisions we make this week will largely shape our course for the next 12 months and beyond. I'm sure by Friday we will retain the strong base from which we can deliver our public services and be able to support islanders through the next year. Sir, read by the Deputy Greffier, I move the proposition.
Proposition seconded.
It is, sir.
Well, the first item to consider by way of amendment is the 17th amendment brought by Deputy Alves, and I ask the Greffier to read the amendment.
After the words Articles 9(2)A of the law, insert the words, except the personal income tax for 2024 should be increased by $160,000 to reflect the restriction of the renter room income tax relief to only those households servicing a mortgage on their main residence.
Deputy.
Thank you, sir. This amendment is simple and seeks to offer a much more targeted and fair approach to the current renter room tax relief and raise revenue by making it only claimable by those who have a mortgage. The Council of Ministers are correct in their comments when they state that this amendment will currently only do this until 2026, when the mortgage income tax relief will no longer be available. So when I realised that the government were doing nothing to support mortgage payers directly, who have been amongst some of the hardest hit by the recent significant rises in cost of living, I did look at freezing the current mortgage income tax reliefs in order to support mortgage payers. Unfortunately, I was unable to find sufficient funding or an alternative revenue raising mechanism to cover the cost of freezing the mortgage interest relief for 1 year. One of the original points of the introduction of this renter room relief was to increase the housing stock. However, a simple look online, you can see that there is a large number of homes and self-contained units to rent, some of which are actually advertised at significantly less than the $10,000 annual relief. Prior to the renter room relief of £10,000, those renting a room out of their home already benefited from a flat rate deduction of 25% for sleeping-only arrangements and 50% reduction for a meals supplied arrangement. If this amendment is adopted, those without mortgages would still benefit from this deduction before being charged 20% on the remainder of the income. This means that instead of being charged the full 20% on the income received from renting out a room, they would actually only be charged a maximum of 15%. Revenue raised from this amendment could be better directed into more supportive strategies for those who are struggling with housing costs. Finally, sir, Council of Ministers have stated in their comments that research undertaken in November 2023 show a range of rooms to rent at a monthly cost of £600 to £680. But they have not included any detail on where this research has come from, how it was conducted, which suggests that this is an unsubstantiated claim. Ultimately, sir, this is a matter of principle. The current relief disproportionately benefits those who need it the least. If members want to support initiatives that are targeted and support those that need it the most, then members should support this amendment. I make the amendment.
Is the amendment seconded? Yes, sir. Deputy Barbour.
Thank you, sir. Rent a Room was introduced in January 2023. This is a tax incentive aimed at encouraging homeowners to let out a room in their house, provided that, and I want to reiterate the provisions, the total gross income does not exceed £10,000, the room is not rented to a family member, the room is in the homeowner's main residence and is not a self-contained unit, and the lodger is over the age of 18 or placed in a room by appropriate organisations if they are under 18 and the assurances there's been the necessary safeguarding checks. Those are the principles. Sir, the Deputy for St Helier Central only want this scheme to apply to people who have a mortgage, but doesn't really doesn't go deep enough, in my view, of an explanation. The Deputy goes on further. It could be argued that tax relief on lodging income up to £10,000 could encourage those who offer a room to rent to increase the prices. Where is the evidence for this, sir, and how many? Sir, the market sets the prices. If there's plenty of availability, then prices will remain low. We are guided by the Deputy to look at a simple online search, which shows abundance of properties for rent available, as she just described earlier. Even if this were true, it seems very unlikely that anyone would want to put up their rent just to get the most out of tax relief. If there are lots of availability and a homeowner bumps up the rent, then a lodger will simply move somewhere else that is cheaper. This is the law of supply and demand. On the point about housing costs being the single biggest contributor to driving up RPI, I'd point to the following section from the Housing Minister, Deputy Ward's White Paper from April this year, and see page 33. The rent-a-room scheme is a way to help people off the streets, away from sofa surfing, away from precarious living conditions, for example, if there's a violent partner or poor quality accommodation, or even in the hospitality. I believe, sir, that in the hospitality this rent-a-room scheme is being used. And therefore, any limiting to that scheme is standing in the way of that aim. This suggestion is a counterproductive measure in helping the less well-off in society. Surely the policy should apply to any homeowner, regardless of whether they have a mortgage or not. There are plenty of people who have inherited property and consequently don't have a mortgage, or those who have worked hard all their lives and repaid their mortgages, and now need a bit of cash and perhaps a bit of company. These people, a lot of people, are property rich but cash poor and may want to rent out a room to supplement their old age pension. Why put barriers in the way? These homeowners should be encouraged. I'm saddened, sir, that this amendment has been brought to basically stop those who do not have a mortgage, as it has been stated, as they have no housing costs apart from utilities and upkeep. I find that a very sweeping statement, sir. And from benefiting from a room tax relief. I feel that the amendment is ill thought out and makes assumptions that people who don't have a mortgage don't have the same expenses of people who do have a mortgage. This rent-a-room scheme is open to all homeowners who fulfil the criteria, as I alluded to earlier, and wish to use this facility. It was introduced based on the 2021 census that found around 1/4 of households were under-occupying their accommodation, and that this initiative is designed to encourage those empty rooms to be used. Please reject this 17th amendment as presented, and I thank you, sir, and the members for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Deputy Tadier.
Thanks, sir. I don't think we're here to debate whether or not renting a room out is a good or bad thing. And we've heard from the unofficial spokesperson for government, who's not a member of government, to lead the charge against this amendment, and Deputy Ward. I also presume, sir, that there'll be an opportunity for members to express interest if they're actually caught, if they actually have rooms that they are renting out either permanently or presumably part-time in the summer to students, because I think they're also captured by that tax break. I don't have that, but it's certainly something I might consider in the future. And I would declare that, of course, were that the case. Let me say on record that I know the value of renting a room. So when I lived in Berlin as a student, I rented a room on the outskirts of Berlin from a very nice German lady, with the added bonus that she only spoke German and Russian. And because I didn't speak any Russian, we were obliged to communicate in German, and that was the exact point. And she didn't need any tax incentive to rent a room out to me. She had an incentive. It was called the rent that I paid her. The rent that I paid her was her incentive, and she might have also liked the company, sir. And it's certainly, I was quite happy to pay what I thought was a reasonable rent, and I was happy for her company and to be able to communicate with her in German, sir, and sometimes cook with her, although she didn't like the smell of garlic for some strange reason, which was, Knoblauch, das riecht so. But so I don't think German's an official language of the Assembly, so I'll desist from speaking in that too much, lest it bring back bad memories. Now, why am I making that point is that I think there are already people in our community who rent out rooms, and there are people who are tenants and lodgers in such houses, and they were already there before this government brought in this so-called tax incentive. And the bottom line is that we have absolutely no idea, first of all, why this was brought in, really, and secondly, we don't know how effective this tax break to people who already own property is. And I can fully understand why Deputy Alves might seek to put a carve-out for those with mortgages, and it does need an explanation, I think. I think she's touched on it already and may have to do so again in the summing up. It's probably because in the current market, there may be people out there who have taken out a mortgage, either predicated on the fact that they can't quite afford the monthly payments, therefore they would rent a room out, which is perfectly legitimate, and I think something that government is indeed encouraging, or that they've been caught in a situation where they've got a sudden increase in their mortgage because of the recent interest rate hikes, and rather than being forced to sell, they actually need the extra income. And all of that can happen without government intervention. And what I would say is that if the government wants to help anyone out there who might be finding it difficult to rent a room, then simply, if they want to provide a tax break to somebody, do it to the tenant, not to the landlord. They're the ones who could do with £10,000 extra of tax incentive. And the current system we have, of course, gives an allowance to everybody, whether they own property or they don't. So it stands to reason, if we're going to be going back on this project about rent a room, that we don't apply it across the board. And there is a differential, isn't there? If you own a property which has been in your family for generations and you've never had to pay for, or the mortgage was paid off many years ago, you clearly don't have the same overheads that somebody who's got a current mortgage, perhaps one that's just been taken out, has. So I think it's quite clear that this is a very well, not just well-intentioned, but actually a very well thought out and well-targeted amendment where Deputy Alves has consulted, I think, with people about what the implications might be, what the unintended consequences might be for those with a mortgage. And I think what she's brought here is something that we could and I think should all support. And the other point is that it raises revenue. And goodness knows, don't we need some revenue? It may not be all the revenue that for the concessions that this government have made, but they've made millions of pounds of concessions to backbenchers because, let's face it, early on in the debate, they'd struggle to get their government plan through, even with support from their own ministers, if they hadn't conceded to the multi-million pounds of extra spending that they will be making, which hasn't been costed. So at least this is a cost, a savings that we can make, and we ask the Assembly to support that.
So any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. And I appreciate Deputy Ward, who is not actually a member of the government, who is actually a backbencher. And I think backbenchers are entitled to be seen as independent. They don't need to be smeared, as the Deputy seems to be intending on doing that.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to smear the Deputy and refer to her as a member of the government.
Yes. That's,
Okay, so the rent-a-room scheme means it's a much better use. One of the policies of this government is how do we get more effective use of the built environment that we have around this island. It's really, really important. One point I would back up the Deputy with. Deputy Ward said 25% of homes are under-occupied. Actually, it's 45%, so it's a significantly higher figure. So not only that, but it also offers temporary, as the point has already been made, low-cost accommodation that particularly suits people working here in seasonal roles. For instance, St Ballard's College students use these opportunities significantly. Rent-a-room, therefore, tackles affordability and makes use of the other government policy, under-occupied homes that we have. So the mortgage interest rate relief ends in 2025, and I recognise that Deputy Alves also recognises this fact. This means that rent-a-room wouldn't exist if the amendment were to be accepted. This amendment also, and I think it's really important to remember this, and again referenced by Deputy Ward, about elderly islanders who have maybe paid off their mortgage, require an extra income, they can just about survive on the income provided by government, and they would like a little extra in their pocket so they can have a better quality of life. Why should we be discriminating against those individuals? I think it's appalling. We recognise that some of the poorest people in our society today are those who own their own homes and are pensioners. And this is an attempt to discriminate against them, and I think that's appalling. The property search, I would just add, that the Deputy refers to in her amendment, is not relevant to the rent-a-room scheme. A student here for the summer is perhaps not looking to rent a two-bedroom apartment for a year. They're just simply looking to temporarily find some cheap accommodation in the form of a space. Thank you.
Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to point out something to my fellow Deputy Taddier in respect of some of the constituents that we have. Some of them have purchased houses under former schemes by government to assist them in buying those houses, and they are not particularly rich. And to some extent, they do need to take into account whether they are made liable to tax and whether it's going to affect things like income support and other things. So I think one has to be very careful about making assumptions in respect of property owners. So to this extent, I find myself inclining more towards government.
Deputy Mezey.
Thank you, sir. I do truly wonder whether the government realises how out of touch it comes across when they have ministers like the Housing Minister speaking in the way he did in that previous debate, so suggesting that pensioner homeowners are among the poorest people in society. If he looks at statistics, I think he'll find it's pensioner social renters that are among some of the poorest in our society. So those are people who would never benefit from this kind of thing, but his government wants to prioritise tax breaks for people making money from renting property. But the residential tenancy law, no, that'll get delayed, and it just shows where his priorities are. So I think the rent-a-room scheme is a complete mess and shows the wrong priorities because it offers tax breaks for people to apparently incentivise them as if making money wasn't enough to incentivise them. So I said at the time that I considered that to be poor value for money for taxpayers. I still consider that to be the case. But if one thing could possibly be done to mitigate that and at least focus some of that incentive on people with mortgages, some of whom will have suffered from interest rates going up and who would benefit, I think, quite objectively more by targeting this than having it untargeted, then so I think that's a worthy thing to do. There already are incentives that those who own the homes outright can benefit from, as Deputy Alves explained, to do with what they provide as a wider part of the service than just giving them a rule. So having an extra one on top of that, I think really is taking the mickey, sir. It's not a good use of public money, and we ought to be focusing on where we can make the most positive impact, and it is not to provide tax breaks for people who don't need them.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes to speak on the amendment? Deputy Lord Ward.
Thank you, sir. I would also add real issues over the rent-to-room scheme for a number of reasons. First of all, the simplistic approach of the government, sir, that simply by having this and having a stat from some sort of untargeted information as to how many homes are under-occupied, not knowing what type of under-occupation is, for example. And then by introducing a subsidy, which is what this is, a rent subsidy in the form of a tax relief, that suddenly we would in some way solve the problem of many people's housings and insecurity. But what this does is it leaves people, if it does work, and we have absolutely no evidence that it's working, we have absolutely no information on it. We're just continuing to spend money in this way, in an untargeted. And let's think about that, sir. If someone was to come along and say, I want to spend this money, but it's not targeted in any way, you don't know who's actually going to use it. We don't have the data on it. We've only just got some form of landlord licensing system. We don't have any laws which want to be updated because they're being delayed and delayed and delayed. If a backbencher bought that, they wouldn't have a chance. However, what we've got is a system that is giving away money. Hopefully, we don't know how much is spent, sir. Actually, this money might not be given away because it might not be working. This is a revenue-raising proposition from Deputy Alves, simply because she has recognised that there is a need amongst some people with rented room, and if there is an incentive to work, it will be if you have a mortgage, and therefore you will get a tax relief on that part of what you're doing because it helps you. But it does not target anybody else in that way, apart from giving extra income, where we don't even know if it's needed. And one of the problems that we have in this is not simply, I'll give you some examples, sir. When we talked about this originally, we had the argument about St Brellard's College. And I know a few people who went to students from St Brellard's College. And their comments to me were, to be quite frank, I've always rented St Brellard's College, and I always will, because it's a great thing to do in the summer, and we make some money out of it. I don't need this tax incentive at all. However, I'll take it. Yeah. Now, is that really the way this government wants to be prudent with our money, with taxpayers' money, as we keep saying? Is that really the way to do it? You don't really need it, but have it anyway, because you're actually in a good position. And later on, we're going to be asked to make salami-sliced cuts from every single budget across the government. And £160,000 is more than the cut to Home Affairs. It's a large proportion of the amount of money in education children. It's just under half the amount of money that will come from health in order to fund a sector of our economy is desperately in need. If that's the economics that this government is going to bring forward to this assembly, we really are in trouble. So let's take the first opportunity that we can to end that type of nonsense, sir. Have a prudent, thought about, intelligent approach to a system that is not working. Well, we don't know if it's working. And let's make that change so it becomes more targeted, more appropriate to what we want to do, and effectively a better spend of taxpayers' money. I urge you to intelligently support this amendment. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. There are just a few inconsistencies in the arguments coming forward that I felt I needed to address. Deputy Ward has just said no evidence. There's no evidence to show this scheme is working. And I may be wrong here, but I believe this scheme has been in place for less than a year. That's why there's no evidence, because we haven't had an income tax year to see how many people are claiming this on their income tax forms. So there is no evidence because the scheme hasn't been in place long enough to know whether it works or not, which means that the argument that, oh, there's no evidence, therefore we should stop it, falls away. Because we need to see this in action for more than 1 year in order to see whether it works or not. I also wanted to point out that I was just looking for the actual statistics, but I know Deputy Waugh was talking about pensioner households without a mortgage, pensioner households who without a mortgage are, they are a very high category of people in low income. They absolutely are. And I know that, I think it was Deputy Mezek who tried to throw that back at Deputy Waugh, but it is true that pensioners without a mortgage but who own the home, possibly because one, they paid it off earlier in their life or they've inherited it later in their life, but they are on a state-only pension and that's the only income they have. They struggle. They struggle as much as anyone, and this scheme is absolutely devised in order to help incentivise them to rent out a room, get something of a tax break on it. And so it is not a case of only people in rental income, in rental accommodation are the ones struggling. That is not correct. And if Deputy Mezek wishes to represent people on lower incomes in this island, then he needs to look beyond property ownership and whether or not someone owns a property or not, because their ability to cope with the day-to-day costs of living this island are not defined by them owning or not owning a property. So, sir, I quite simply want to say, we don't have evidence that this is working. We don't have evidence that this is not working. The evidence in the report that Deputy Alves puts has nothing about whether this scheme works or doesn't work. There is absolutely nothing in there which tells you whether this scheme does or doesn't work. So this isn't a well-thought-through proposition. This is a reactionary proposition, in my opinion, that is just aimed at really saying we don't like people owning property. That's actually what it is designed, I believe, to do. And therefore, people who do own property and can use it to better the island by freeing up more accommodation, by having an incentive to free up more accommodation, I believe that's what the government should be doing. We've got a really simple tax system. It doesn't therefore allow for many levers, is the word we often use, to be used. But this is one of the ways that we can try and encourage people who own a property to rent out a room, to provide accommodation for other people when we know that there is a need for accommodation. So, sir, I really do ask the Assembly, at the very least, let's have 1 more year of this to see what the figures are at the end of it, because then we'll have some evidence one way or the other. But we don't have that evidence at the moment, and as a result, I don't believe Deputy Alves' proposition stands at all, sir, and I would urge the Assembly to reject it. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Gorst.
Thank you, sir. I will be brief because I believe that my colleagues here to my physical right were against the introduction of rent-a-room in last year's government plan. They've been quite clear on that. And although the mover of the proposition is clearly indicating that she's wishing to see it targeted in a way which I don't think works, but we'll come on to that. The reality is that the way that the amendment is drafted, it would be a decision today to stop rent-a-room allowance because of the timing of the mechanism to which it is attached and the information that the department would have. This is talking about individuals with mortgages. After 2026, there'll be no requirement to say on your tax return that you've got a mortgage, and therefore that would mean that the department wasn't able to give this relief in that regard. The reality is, as the Deputy Barbara Ward, be careful to give Christian name as well, Deputy Barbara Ward, quite eloquently again explained why rent-a-room was a tax incentive mechanism that she came knocking on my door to explore right in the very early days of this government. We did the work. We've had positive feedback from hospitality and from St Brillard's College. It may not be that everybody that takes a student from St Brillard's College feels the same, but we had consultations, what's the word, so we were lobbied by them to say that they were finding it more and more difficult to get people to rent rooms to students. So I think that this is a very small but important part of helping us deal with some of the housing problems that we have, and it also deals with this really important idea that drives a cohesive community. So older members of our community who might have spare rooms can feel a financial benefit and also a tax benefit from renting out that room, and we're creating the sort of community that we'd like to see created elsewhere as well. So for those reasons, I hope that members don't reverse the decision that they made last year. I, as I say, am lobbied to say that this is working, and we should continue to let it work so that we can then have gather the statistical evidence, which again my colleagues here to my right wish rightly to see, but we can only see once it's been in operation for a number of years. So that's my position. So
Much, Deputy Renouf.
Thank you, sir. Deputy Morell and Deputy Gorst have made some of the points I wish to make, but there's one point I would like to pick up that some of the reformed Jersey deputies have made, which is the idea that the incentive should be the rent, which sounds fair enough. But the problem is we have massive under occupation, and we have a housing shortage. And therefore, whether or not the incentive should be the rent or not, the two things are not matching up at the moment. We have a gap. We have a lot of rooms that are empty, and people are not using them in a way that they potentially could. So it seems to me we want to encourage more of that. And the point of an incentive is to try and test out whether there is a sort of an extra financial positive sort of benefit that would encourage more people to do that. And as Deputy Morell said, we don't yet know whether that is working, but we should certainly give it a chance to find out, because it is such a potentially big win. And, we are dealing with the reality, not the theory. The reality is that not enough people who could potentially rent out rent out rooms are doing so. And this is a good chance to try and increase that number. And I think we should keep the incentive in place to allow that to play out.
Deputy Feltham.
Thank you, sir. I will keep this brief. I just wanted to take the opportunity to, following the Treasury Minister's speech, to remind members what we've previously heard from the Treasury Minister. Because the Treasury Minister suggested that he would be undertaking some kind of assessment of the current rent-a-room tax relief. Whereas he's previously told us in answers to written questions that the government does not routinely undertake policy evaluations of long-standing tax allowances and reliefs. Further, he is not minded to embark on the labour-intensive exercise to catalogue and evaluate all of the existing personal and business allowances. Such allowances and reliefs are uncontrolled expenditure. Further, the idea that the Treasury will be ascertaining some level of whether this has worked or not via collecting data. It's my understanding, and perhaps perhaps Deputy Alves, when in her summing up, can clarify this. It's my understanding that currently people renting out rooms don't actually have to specifically claim this relief. So there's nothing in the data being collected currently by the tax department to ascertain whether or not this has actually worked effectively as an incentive. Because when people fill out their tax form, all they need to do is put in the income that they're getting from renting a room. So they may not even know that they're going to get this relief. They don't have to ask for it. Also, one of the other things that I would like to ask Deputy Alves to address in her summing up was the assertion made by the Treasury Minister that when the mortgage interest relief comes to an end, that by us adopting this amendment now, that would automatically bring Rent-a-Room to an end, because there'd be no way of telling who has a mortgage and who hasn't. Well, I've got a simple solution to that. Why not change the tax form to enable them to collect that information? So those are the points I'd like to make. Personally, I would like to see more evidence that before we have any expenditure, not just uncontrolled expenditure like such a tax relief, I need to see evidence that it's actually working. And to date, we haven't seen any evidence that this expenditure provides us good value for money and good outcomes for the people of the island. So I urge you to support this amendment.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes to speak? I close the debate and call upon Deputy Alves to respond.
Thank you, sir. And I'd like to thank everybody for their contributions. I do want to make it very clear that I do not wish to discriminate against the poorest in our society. I never have, and I never will. However, if somebody is asset rich and cash poor, they do have the option to release equity or to downsize. And I was glad to hear that Deputy Cole's incentive to downsize was approved by this government. So I'm not going to pick out any particular speakers, and I'm not going to repeat people's contributions in this debate. I'm just going to address some themes that were brought up. So I think one of the questions I was asked was why mortgage payers? And I think it's quite obvious that the sudden increase in mortgage rates has really put some people on edge. Mortgage payers have had mortgage interest relief, and this is being eroded away year after year. So when I first applied for my mortgage, I was actually asked if I would consider renting out one of the rooms in my home, and that if so, this could be taken into account as an additional income and would help me with my mortgage application. I'm not sure if that's still the case or not, but that was the case some 10 years or so. With regards to evidence, Deputy Morrell is correct that there hasn't been a full year of this, so there is a lack of evidence, but there was also a lack of evidence when the scheme was introduced in the first place. So I may not have physical evidence, but I do have members of the public telling me themselves that they have seen lodging prices when they've been a lodger in a home increased. And that's why I brought this amendment, sir. I make a point to be responsive to my constituents and try to alleviate what I can. Sir, to suggest that I do not like people owning their property outright is ludicrous. I would love for everybody to be able to own their own property in their outright. Sir, this is why I play the lottery every Christmas. So, sir, I think Deputy Feltham addressed Deputy Gorst's comments around the Rent-a-Room falling away. And also, I believe that it is correct that there is not an option to ask for the relief to be applied to on the income tax return. However, I will also say this. Deputy Gore suggests that the Rent-a-Room would fall away after 2026. However, the Minister did not approach me or talk to me at all about this, or propose an amendment to my amendment. Ultimately, sir, this amendment does not stop people from renting out a room in their homes if they wish to. It simply asks them to pay a maximum rate of 15% on that income. That is all. So, sir, like I said in my speech, it's up to the Assembly whether they wish to support incentives that are targeted or not. So, sir, I urge the Assembly to support this, and I maintain the amendment and ask for the appel. Thank you.
Prayer is called for. Invite members to return to their seats. The vote is on Amendment 17. I'll ask the Greffier to open the voting and members to vote. If members have had the opportunity of casting their vote, I ask the greffier to close the voting. The amendment has been defeated. 10 votes pour, 36 votes contre, no abstentions.
For the 10, please.
Those voting for, Deputies Southern, Tadier, Ward, Alves, Mezek, Coles, Horay, Curtis, Feltham and Kovac.
May I just raise a slight issue of the number of comments that are coming through that are late? As somebody who's had questions refused because they were a minute late because my auto-send didn't work, we either have rules or we don't, and there's so many just seem to be coming through and saying they're late because there simply wasn't time to respond. So as a backbencher, we don't have the support the government has. The government knew the government plan was going. They knew about all of the amendments way in advance. And so I think that I just want to voice my concern over late comments being received again. Thank you.
The standing orders, as you know, provide, Deputy, that when comments come in, if they are late, they must have an explanation as to why they've come in late. My understanding from the greffier is that comments that have come in late do have that explanation in them. It's a point that you're entitled to make, but I'm not sure it's something that causes any interruption in the debate or anything of that nature.
So just to say, sir, the comments did seem to say that they're late because government didn't have time to write them, and it just strikes me as a strange issue. Thank you, sir.
I think that's a matter that if there is an issue where that's concerned, it's a matter for PPC to take forward, that we must proceed with the debate. The next amendment is that brought by Deputy Andrews. It's the second amendment, and I ask the greffier to read the amendment.
Paragraph A. After the words Article 9(2)A of the law, insert the words, except that in Summary Table 1, the 2024 estimate for corporate income tax should be increased by 200,000. Paragraph L. After the words Appendix 3 to the report, insert the words, except that on pages 40 and 41, the paragraph entitled Regulatory Technology, RegTech, Super Deduction should be deleted.
Deputy.
Thank you very much, sir. Sir, when I was reading the government plan, it was important in my role as a non-executive member that I was looking to be objective and constructive. And if I saw there was any prospective policies that were proposed that were in need of improvement or potentially rescindment, that I ought to take the steps by lodging an amendment. And that is exactly what I have done. Now, the RegTech super tax deduction of 150% will allow corporations to apply 15 pence tax credit on each pound that is spent on technology. Now, currently, firms are permitted to claim 10 pence on £1 of spend in technology. So there will be an additional 5 pence, sir. Now, the Minister and the Council of Ministers are aware that there will be a £200,000 loss in revenue, corporate tax revenue. And I'd just like to bring members' attention to some of the statements that have been made in regard to the incentives that will be applied on the corporations who then make those investments in technology. Because it is quoted here that if this amendment is accepted, this runs the risk of Jersey falling behind in the adoption of regulatory compliance technology. Those are the words that are mentioned in the comments paper, but I'm sorry, that is not the truth. Corporations pay 10% corporate tax, 10%. The whole purpose of Jersey having low taxation is to allow corporations to have more profits so they can reinvest all of their monies into technologies. So there is no need to apply a new measure a new incentive that will also be used essentially as an avoidance measure of tax to some extent. And it is also of concern to me because in the comments paper, sir, it was mentioned that corporate taxation provides half of government revenues, when in actual fact, sir, I have received a written response to my question about corporate taxation as a percentage of government revenue, and for the last 5 years, corporate taxation has been less than 10%. So there is an inconsistency in terms of what the comments paper is saying and then the response I receive in my written question just before. And I just find that peculiar, and there should really be a consistent approach because it's about facts that we ought to be speaking about here. So I don't understand why there is that discrepancy, sir. Now, in the comments paper, sir, it was alluded to that there is a capital allowance of up to 25%. It was not explained, though, that this can be reduced when equipment is discharged of or sold. So actually the percentage is much lower in many instances where there is a 25% capital allowance. I just think that has to be made very, very clear for members of the Assembly, sir. Now, this is a tax incentive, okay, that is being proposed in very difficult economic circumstances where we are seeing double-digit inflation, we are seeing households struggle, we are seeing firms struggle due to arising input costs. And now we do see is an expansionary policy that, okay, yes, it's worthwhile in terms of saying that the incentive is there to try and generate additional investment in technology. But we also have to understand here, firms are investing anyway. They don't need to be applied with a new tax incentive because RegTech is something that many corporations are investing in. It's a natural process. It is happening, sir. And even when I was reading a labour market study of the OECD in July, RegTech was mentioned, and corporations mainly are investing in RegTech, and it's more to complement human labour. It's not to actually eradicate jobs. In fact, we will see more people being upskilled and reskilled, but job roles will change. So, sir, this whole argument, this counter-argument that has been used about applying tax credits on investment in technology will incentivise firms to invest in RegTech to improve productivity alone, I believe to be absolutely nonsensical, because firms will naturally be taking decisions to remain relevant in the marketplace without any need for economic policy such as this to be implemented. So, sir, I am happy to bring the proposal before the Assembly, sir.
Is the amendment seconded? Yes, sir. Does any member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Farnham.
Well, sir, I mean, the amendment is well made, but I'm not sure I can support it as a former proponent in investment in the economy. And this is, I understand, a pilot scheme, a 2-year pilot scheme, to measure the impact and the economic return on it. I think sometimes you have to speculate to accumulate, and if this is even partially successful, I think we stand to, despite giving a generous tax incentive on investment, the aim is, I'm sure, and the Treasury Minister will correct me, I'm sure, or someone if I'm wrong, is to generate strong investment in technology and provide an increased return in corporation tax to set the foundations down. So that's my current position. Like I say, the amendment was well made, but in this stage, unless there's some other evidence that jumps up to prove to the opposite, so I think I'm unable to support it on this occasion. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? Deputy Scott.
Yes, sir. I note this amendment hasn't been brought by this corporate, by the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel, who also have a job in scrutinising the government plan. There was a suggestion that the reason why the finance industry has a 10% rate, and that's to give it more profits to invest in technology. Of course, that's not the only reason. To attract investment in companies based in Jersey as a location is another reason. The Economics and International Affairs panel did also have a look at this, and we did receive submissions which minded us not to make any amendment to the proposal. There is one which basically, I can read you one from the Jersey Association Trust, Company Association, saying it's most welcome. Looking at the figure showing at 450,000, this figure appears to be on the low side, and we believe this should be revisited. I'll leave the Minister for the Treasury to respond to that, maybe. Yeah, generally, what we've also heard is it's not to eradicate labour at all. No, it's, as the government has said in its comments, is to free up human resources, of which all sectors are desperately short at the moment, so that they can be applied more productively towards our economy. So I will not be supporting this amendment.
Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. And yes, I speak in a similar vein to Deputy Scott and Deputy Farnham. I think it's really important to understand that I mentioned earlier today that I mentioned the Barriers to Business report that Jersey Business published last week. And of course, and perhaps unsurprisingly to many in the Assembly, that report pointed to processes within government as one of the things that businesses find difficult to negotiate and navigate and slows them down and costs money. But equally, processes within businesses can do exactly the same thing. And whilst Deputy Andrews talks about a low tax rate, which is correct, financial services companies that pay tax pay 10% tax, we also need those companies to look at themselves and look at where they can improve their processes. Because there is a reality throughout Jersey's economy that over the last 17 years, 2007, yeah, 17 or kind of 15, 16 years, Jersey's economy hasn't performed in the way that we need it to perform. And that, in overall GBA terms, also goes for the financial services sector. One of the ways we can encourage greater performance, greater productivity in the financial services sector is for them to automate processes as much as they possibly can, to reduce the length of processes. And of course, when you're a financial services company, almost in any area of financial services, you are constantly doing know your client procedures. You are constantly undertaking them for other companies that need to understand their clients as well. You are constantly checking the source of funds. These are really onerous processes that take a long time. The idea that we incentivize businesses in the financial services sector to focus on that particular area of regulatory process, I think is a fine one, because it is one in which we can gain a competitive advantage. All of these regulations that the financial services sector works within are similar regulations in many other financial services sectors around the world. But if we want to maintain our leading position, then we need to be at the cutting edge, and we need to be pushing forward, really incentivizing growth in productivity. And process automation is absolutely one of those areas. And so, sir, one of the downsides to having, as I said earlier, simple tax regime, and particularly low and simple tax regime, is that you do not have many levers to pull on. It is entirely normal for governments to use tax deductions in this way to incentivize behavior, either at the citizen level or at the corporate level. It doesn't matter which. All governments use tax as a way to incentivize certain behaviors. That's exactly what the renter room is about. This is also what this regulatory super deduction is about. And so I think it really is necessary. It is a way of saying to the financial services sector, please, we really want you to look at this area. We believe in this area you can start gaining a competitive advantage, and we will back you in doing that as a government by giving you this deduction. And it would then be quite right and follow that if this works, that we could do a very similar sort of deduction for other areas of the business sector which are taxed, such as large retailers, such as the utilities. This is who are all taxed at 20%. This is an area in which we can use one of the tools we have to incentivise better performance within our business sectors, and therefore get Jersey on that path to greater economic growth, which we know we need to get onto in order to deal with the challenges that healthcare and social care costs are going to give us over the next 15 years. So I strongly urge members to reject this amendment. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Deputies, any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Tadier.
Thanks, sir. Part of me is tempted to say, would the Deputy not prefer for this to wait a year to see and let this particular amendment bed in and then see if we've got evidence? But maybe not. Maybe he can get to the dizzy heights of 11 votes for this amendment today. There are a couple of bits in the report that I'm interested in. One's his comment that he thinks that Jersey finance service businesses are taxed at a diminutive rate. So he says that, and I think he said it in his speech as well, of 10%. What does he think that the tax rate for financial services companies should be? If 10 is diminutive, and very much the implication in his opening speech was that they don't pay enough tax. So I'm not saying I agree or disagree with that, but I'd be interested to know what his thoughts are on that. I suppose like, my question here is, am I missing something? Is that surely, again, the incentive here is every business who wants to maintain its competitivity, is that right? Competitiveness. Yeah, let's go with that. I'm sure you can say both, but you have to be able to pronounce them. So competitiveness in the market, it's within their interest to do that, isn't it? And it's not just an issue of RegTech. Any company needs to make sure that it's keeping up to date with a whole host of the latest technologies, the latest best practices, which may or may not be related to tech. And so it's interesting that there is this additional government red tape on top of it, positive red tape, if we can call it that, but it's red tape nonetheless, because the default position, of course, should be one of a free market, shouldn't it? Let markets compete, let businesses compete amongst themselves. And the point I was going to make is that they only pay tax on their profits. So, of course, any money that they spend and reinvest in their businesses, whether that be in RegTech or in a new air conditioning unit or in training for their staff, they don't pay tax on that. So I don't see why there is necessarily this need for the extra lever, if you like, in that, although the government clearly thinks it is. I think it's difficult with this one because we have a deputy who is happy to support unproven expenditure from this government, but he also seems to be picking and choosing when he wants to call the government out on it. So at least government's being consistent and at least Reform Jersey being consistent. But maybe that's a little bit harsh on the deputy and he can explain his position a little bit more in summing up, because I'm always fascinated by members' underlying philosophical and political positions in these areas.
Any other member wish to speak? Deputy Gorst.
Thank you, sir. Yes, I did, must confess to having an enjoyable meeting with the Deputy. I think it was on Friday. And we came down to what I think were really political differences about how businesses should either be supported and what we should expect of them in an economy, and that those conversations are always interesting, or I find them so. Where I, of course, don't agree with the Deputy's proposal to remove this incentive is that he says it's incredibly generous, or generous, and we heard that in his opening speech, and that it's unnecessary or not necessary. Well, members will have heard his opening speech. 150% super deduction sounds incredibly generous. And of course, with something like this, we are wanting to encourage companies to avail themselves of it. What that means in reality is an additional 5 pence in the pound, which I don't think is overly generous. what we have found historically is that companies that might qualify for this could indeed be investing around 100,000 an annum on this sort of technology. We've done a survey to look at this, so that means their tax bill is reduced by about £5,000, which in the scale of corporate tax isn't that great. In questioning during other sessions, of course, and Deputy Felton was critical of me earlier, I made it very clear that the rent-a-room scheme is a new scheme that this government has started, and that we would gather data and do some of the analysis work going forward. This scheme is a pilot scheme which will be in place for 2 years, and we will gather that data and be able to give good statistical evidence of how it has worked or not. I fundamentally believe that it will work, and I have been speaking to other sectors of the economy, and they have been interested in understanding if something in due course could be rolled out to them to support them with the bureaucratic burden. This Assembly rightly has added a compliance bureaucratic burden across financial services industry for many a decade to meet with the highest international standards. That's put great pressure on recruitment around compliance and regulatory staff who now are personally liable in many of these areas. And it is only right that we then as a government seek to, yes, deal with the population issues, yes, partly also trying to mitigate ongoing stress in the housing situation by the use of technology. And it has got to be core to our economic success going forward, and it really is at the heart of the Sustainable Economic Development's Future Economy programme, is the use of harnessing technology to undertake jobs so that we as an economy can move into the higher value add jobs for individuals in our community and thereby increase productivity as well. But the deputy said that's it's not overly generous, and it is necessary. It's necessary for those very broad reasons, but it's also necessary in the way that our financial services sector operates. On the one hand, we can say that we tax at a reasonably low level, although it is internationally competitive. We have a very clear headline rate, that is the rate of tax which is paid. Other international finance centres don't have that clear headline rate, and the effective rate that some of these companies pay is much lower than the headline rate. And it is fair to say that the Jersey Financial Services Company know that they must invest in RegTech, but many are waiting to follow the lead of their head offices or peers in larger finance centres. The super deduction incentivises them to act sooner rather than later to cement their position at the leading edge of industry. And that is important because a lot of our businesses now are global in nature, and they've got offices around the globe. And they are looking to see where they might test, in the first instance, this type of technology. And if we have got these incentives in place, and firms have already written to me and said this is one of the tipping points that they will then invest in this technology in Jersey. But let's be clear, their office in Singapore, their office in Delaware, their office in Luxembourg, they are also fighting to be at the forefront of technology. It's why we need modern office spaces. It's why we need to encourage investment in technology to keep Jersey and its financial services productive and successful into the future. And I think it is certainly worth doing this pilot programme. Businesses have been speaking to government and to previous economic development ministers for as long as we can remember, saying, why can't you think about incentives to help us digitise? And this is a step in that direction. The other point, just in closing my comments, I just wanted to, I think the Deputy had misread the comments because, of course, he's right to say corporate tax is 10% of our overall tax, but the comment says this. If I read the sentence there to put it in context, a little bit tedious, but forgive me. The forward-looking outlook should be compared to a counterfactual where Jersey's finance industry, so it's not corporate tax, it's Jersey's finance industry, falls behind on modernisation and we lose the competitive edge of our key industry. And it is our key industry, the finance industry, which is responsible for 40% of gross value added and half of all tax revenues, not corporate tax revenues, half of all tax revenues. So that's corporate tax revenue. It's the individuals employed in that sector, income tax, and it's their ISE fees. So I really do ask members to reject this proposition and to allow myself to work with the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development and the Assistant Chief Minister with responsibility for financial services to make this work. Thank you.
Deputy Catherine Coates.
Thank you, sir. Like Deputy Andrews, on first reading of the government plan, I was concerned about the super deduction tax incentive on RegTech for finance companies. It's a great idea to support business and especially finance and their regulatory responsibilities, even though they will most likely invest in RegTech regardless of any incentive. But there did not appear to be any controls or risk management. So I contacted Deputy Gorst to ask for a meeting to discuss it. I did not get that meeting. However, I did meet with two of the officers, and Deputy Faltham joined me at that meeting, who also had concerns about this tax incentive. Having discovered that there were no caps in place, I drafted Amendment 4 to cap the amount that could be lost to the island, to shorten the time of the review, and to limit it to on-island providers. My amendment was lodged nearly 4 weeks ago. There was no response from the government. No response, that is, until Thursday afternoon last week, with a phone call from Deputy Gorst expressing concern about one part of the amendment. I explained I would withdraw that part if it really was impractical, and I would research it further. Later that afternoon, comments were published objecting to all three parts of the amendment. The reason I mention this now is because it's not possible to research and respond to potentially practical concerns raised by government when we are only given 1 working day to do so. I complained to Deputy Gorst that he could have responded with these concerns at any point during the last 4 weeks. By only allowing 1 working day before the debates, it means that some concerns raised by backbenchers will most likely fall away, and that is poor government. As a side point, I was also disappointed to hear the admission by the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development that he has not considered the implications on Jersey's main business finance and on our digital sector of RegTech incentives. So, following these last-minute comments, I withdrew my amendment, and now I find I must support Deputy Andrews' amendment to remove the RegTech super deduction entirely. That's disappointing because I support incentives to business, as do my colleagues, but not incentives without limits. The Council of Ministers' own comments paper describes this incentive, and I quote, as a key measure to support innovation and enterprise in Jersey. Well, we only have to look at past endeavours by government to support innovation and enterprise. The Jersey Innovation Fund, for example. One of my companies was the first recipient of a loan from this fund, and we paid back the loan with interest on time. Some other recipients did not, including one business which had no real connections to Jersey, subsequently disappeared from Jersey, and had been handed around £500,000. I contributed to the damning report on the management of the Jersey Innovation Fund, and I can tell States members it was very badly run. The Controller and Auditor General report highlighted serious shortcomings of oversight and governance. So I have no confidence that any business incentives, super deductions or otherwise, run by government will be managed well. There is evidence to the contrary. Will this RegTech super deduction end up costing us millions? The Treasury's estimate is that it will cost us £200,000 next year, but there is no cap on the fiscal impact. There could be a loss of many millions in 2025, with no review having been undertaken. At this time, when Jersey residents are struggling with a cost of living crisis, and when government is asking us to make department cuts in their Amendment 33, this is not a good time to give away our potential revenue in what would be, going on past experience, a poorly managed procedure. For these reasons, I urge States members to vote in favour of Deputy Andrews' amendment to remove the RegTech super deduction.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes to speak? I close the debate and call Deputy Andrews to respond.
Thank you very much, sir. I'd just like to say thank you to all of the members who've contributed to this debate, those in support and those who oppose me. I think it's a very worthwhile a debate to be had, and I'm very pleased that I've brought this amendment before the Assembly, sir. Now, I think in regard to the tax incentive itself, we need to be aware that with technology investment, corporations are already receiving a tax credit. So if, say, a firm invests £100,000, they can claim £10,000 as a tax credit. But this new super tax deduction measure will increase that to £15,000. So there'll be a £5,000 increase as a tax credit that will not be going to the Treasury. And I think that in itself, during the current economic climate, is not a prudent move. We ought to obviously support financial services, and tax credits ought to be applied where necessary. But I also need to bring to members' attention, sir, what the Fiscal Policy Panel had to say in their recent report. They were saying the need for the public sector to be in a surplus, because what we've been doing has been spending too much, we've been neglecting our reserves, and also now we're giving tax breaks to corporations. And that £200,000, and potentially it could be more in prospective tax revenue loss, is not going to be coming into the Treasury. And I think that's a great shame, because what we are seeing is a lack of vision and directive here in terms of managing public finances more prudently, because we're spending too much in too many different areas, and I have to also question the method of spend as well. And now we're looking at, say, the Stabilisation Fund. It's only got about £600,000 left in it, and at one point it had about 50 million in about 2020. So, tax measures where you're seeing supply-side policies being introduced during the current economic climate, I don't believe to be acceptable. And I think Deputy Catherine Curtis made a very good speech, and she mentioned some of the concerns that I had in terms of, she mentioned that there should be a cap that potentially could be introduced, because there is this tax loophole, unfortunately. And I know there will be a counter-argument by those who oppose this amendment, who would say, but don't forget, technology will drive economic productivity. It will increase tax revenues. Now, if that is the case, is there really any need to increase this tax credit when firms are already making the relative investments anyway? And I don't believe there is a need for this super tax deduction to be in place at 150%. It's already in place at 10% of spend, and it should be kept that way. But what we're doing here is we're seeing too many policies where it's kind of this tax credit-based initiative, and it's across a number of areas that it is kind of being proposed in this government plan, and then we're losing prospective revenue. When I say, sir, we also need to be generating a surplus. We need to be, cutting back on government expenditure, and we need to be making transfers to the Stabilisation Fund and the Strategic Reserve Fund. And I don't really see that happening in this government plan, apart from speculative plans where we're seeing if any additional income or underspends are seen, then such transfers will be made to the stabilisation fund. And I just think that is absolutely imprudent, and really what we should have seen is costed transfers being made in the government plan itself. So, sir, I'm happy to call for the appel and we can have this vote. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. The bill is called for. I invite members to return to their seats. Ask the greffier to open the voting. Members have had the opportunity of casting their vote. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The amendment has been defeated. 11 votes pour, 35 votes contre, no abstentions. The next amendment is Amendment 22, brought by Deputy Bezek, and I ask the greffier to read the amendment.
After the words Article 92A of the law, insert the words, except that in Summary Table 1, there shall be inserted a new line below corporate income tax entitled Interest Tax Relief, Letting Properties Only, with a figure of 1.9 million to be placed in a column for the 2026 estimate to include funds generated from the abolition of interest tax relief on mortgages for letting properties.
I wonder if landlords maybe just do need to make a declaration in advance of this particular amendment. I suspect that it's a declaration that should be made, but isn't sufficiently close or is shared with a potential large number of other people.
Well, I think that's probably right. Of course, it would be appropriate, I think, for anyone to declare if they are a landlord in this particular sense, but I don't think it would disqualify anyone from either speaking or voting.
So make the declaration.
Sir, may I suggest we just do it by pressing the buttons on our machines?
Yes.
And then that can be read out.
If people could leave their lights on until the greffier has been able to note the...
So can you clarify the definition? It's whether one is a landlord or one spouse is a landlord, is that right?
Yes, it extends to a spouse as well.
So I'm sorry to try to overcomplicate things, but of course what I'm proposing doesn't affect all landlords. It would only affect landlords who have mortgages who currently benefit from interest tax relief. So if they own them outright or inherited them, etc., that wouldn't be a conflict of interest here.
Well, thank you for that, Deputy, and of course that must be right. I think I think it's open to individuals who are not covered by this not to make a declaration. But it's not going to stop anyone from speaking or voting. So I think if we just take it like that. Is everyone who wishes to make a declaration got their light on? Have we noted?
So can
and we add the.
I think Deputy Mezek's point is valid. I need to make a declaration that I think my spouse is in that exact situation. It won't stop me from supporting the amendment, but I think I can't see why landlords who own their properties outright would need to declare an interest.
I think that must be...
So due to a bereavement in my family, I'm not sure which category I put in, so for the benefit of caution, I'm putting my light on.
Although that said, sir, sorry to interrupt, obviously any landlord could be in a position where that situation might change, they may need to remortgage. So
I think the position is that as I've already indicated, it doesn't disqualify anyone from either speaking nor voting on the matter. People have made a declaration that they may or may not be within the category, and I think that's probably sufficient for the purposes of the record. We have that record taken.
I've got 13 names. Do you want me to read them out?
Yes, please.
For the purpose of the records, declarations to be made by Deputies Moore, Morrell, Labby, Rose-Binet, Shern, Borst, Luce, Joseph, Tadier, the Conotop of St Helier and Brewville, Deputy Howell and the Conotop of St Mary, and also Deputy Tollenbene.
Very well. Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, sir. I think in proposing this amendment, I can be relatively brief because, in all honesty, I think it's the debate on the amendment to this amendment that more of the arguments I think will need to come out there. So the purposes of this amendment is to secure a commitment that interest tax relief for mortgages on letting properties will no longer be available from the year 2026. So in the amendment lodged by the government, in the very first sentence of their report, they say, and I'll get the exact wording up, the Council of Ministers is sympathetic to this amendment. And I think there's a reason why they're sympathetic. It's because they know it's the right thing to do. And it's right, sir, for two reasons. The first is the issue of principle, that interest payments on a mortgage for a letting property is quite clearly not a business expense in what you might consider to be a legitimate business expense to deduct from your tax. It's not like paying to fix a leaky roof. It's not like paying to install a new kitchen. If you're paying interest on a mortgage, that is simply part of the cost of acquiring a capital asset. It's not the cost of providing a service from that asset. The second reason is the issue of fairness, which is that from 2026, mortgage interest tax relief for homeowners is being abolished. We've been on that road now for several years, and it will be complete by the end of next year, and that particular tax relief will no longer exist. And there is quite obviously an unfairness in saying a tax relief that existed previously to provide some support for those buying their homes to live in will be abolished, but those who are buying a surplus of homes from which to run a business and make money from should continue to have that tax relief. That, I think, to most reasonable thinking people is quite clearly unfair. And I will say, sir, that I have had feedback from people who themselves have mortgages for letting properties who recognise this as an unfairness for them to be able to have it on that property, but not the one that they actually live in as their main home. So there clearly is a double standard, and I don't know if it was some kind of discrepancy or loophole at the time that mortgage interest tax relief was proposed for abolition. I think that started in 2015. I don't know if that was simply an oversight that it wasn't extended to these properties, but I think we're in a situation now to recognise that there clearly is an unfairness and a disalignment of the principle in providing a tax relief for the cost of acquiring a capital asset, which is not an actual business expense, that there's something wrong here and we ought to resolve it. So the estimates that I've received from the tax department are that from 2026, they would guess that this would raise an additional revenue of 1.9 million. So when we're having conversations later about value for money savings, there's a good and fair revenue raising option that would help alleviate some of that pressure. The other benefits to timing it in this way, to give at least a little bit of notice to those investors, is that, and I say this bearing in mind the round of questioning we had earlier today, that in theory at least we should have a new residential tenancy law in place by then, which will provide a better framework to protect tenants from no-fault evictions and unfair rent increases. And so being in that situation by then, that will hopefully mitigate any unintended consequences that would otherwise arise from this. So it won't be a surprise to members that I will oppose the amendment that they have lodged to this amendment on the basis that it is classic kicking the can down the road and subjecting a decision to outsourcing by another body, really, rather than making it now on the basis of principle and the basis of fairness, something I think many people are quite frankly fed up of. And in any event, it would prolong the unfairness that will exist at that point between people with mortgages for investment properties versus those with mortgages for the homes that they live in. But I presume that will be a particularly contentious part of this debate, and so I'll reserve my remarks for that amendment, sir, and simply say that I propose this on the basis of those two reasons that it's the right thing to do, and I'm not the least bit surprised that the Council of Ministers is sympathetic to it, because frankly there isn't a good argument against it. So, sir, I make the amendment.
The amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Now, there is an amendment to the amendment proposed by the Council of Ministers, and I ask the Greffier to read that amendment.
Substitute the words 2026 with 2027, and after the words letting properties, insert the words subject to the outcome of the Fiscal Policy Panel's review of Jersey's housing market, which will be published in 2024. A full consultation process and consideration of the timing and cumulative impact upon Jersey's housing market.
Yes, Minister.
Yes, I think I'm responding. I'm moving this amendment, if I may. So that I understand what Deputy Mezek was saying in his opening remarks, that we are sympathetic and understand the points that he has made, and therefore did not wish to oppose the amendment, because we're not poles apart. What he describes as kicking into the long grass for us is appropriate understanding of the implications and having a proper process in place, and therefore our main disagreement is one of timing. And if the amendment is adopted unamended, we cannot know, as I've said, the impact or what the impact on the housing market will be. And we can say that that's not important and of no relevance. But I think if we look back at the housing market over the last 12 months, the week before Christmas, or the fortnight before Christmas, or however many days it was, when this Assembly introduced the additional 3% on stamp duty for buy-to-lets, the market had already started to change. And what we have seen during the course of the year in that particular sector of the market is one that can only be described as stagnation. Of course, we had some off-the-plan purchases to whom that charge applied under the law. And I think that decision last year shows that simply making a decision, yes, it was previously brought forward by the scrutiny panel, and there was and then it was brought here, shows that because of the volatility or the fragility of the housing market as we currently see it, doing this change in an appropriate way after full consideration of the facts is the right thing to do. Because we know that there's evidence, as we've seen in our own housing market from elsewhere, that suggests there's a risk that landlords may simply pass on the increase to their tenants. And the other reason is that members will know that the Chief Economic Advisor has asked the Fiscal Policy Panel, that's independent economists, to review the housing market. And the outcome of that review is due to be published in 2024. It will consider the recent changes and events on the private rental market, as we all know, increases to the Bank of England base rate, the higher rates of stamp duty for buy-to-lets and second homes, as I've just mentioned, the white paper proposing to modernise the residential tenancy law, and new regulations that will be implemented in May 2024. and the Council of Ministers believes that the cumulative effect of those changes should be understood and that it would be imprudent to make further changes without understanding their impact. And there is also concern that the amendment in its current form lacks the detail needed to accept it. In particular, there are concerns about the impact on the commercial property market. And so, sir, ministers, as I say, do understand the point and the issue raised in Deputy Mezek's amendment, but believe that this amendment will mean that we can ensure that those any potential unforeseen difficulties in what is already an extremely difficult market can be avoided, and therefore I propose the amendment.
Is the amendment seconded?
Yes.
Does any member wish to speak on the amendment? Mezek.
Thank you, sir. And as said in my speech for the amendment itself, I oppose this amendment to the amendment. And sir, the reason primarily is because of the double standard that it represents and how out of kilter it is with what is meant to be the government's supposed area of relentless focus on Jersey's housing crisis. So relentless is that focus that we'll outsource something to an independent panel, we'll subject our decisions to the outcome of that review, and in any event, we'll delay it by a year. Wow, some response to a crisis, sir. So the government knows that the position now is morally indefensible to say to people who own their own homes, we're taking this tax relief away from you, despite interest rates going up. But if you're an investor wanting to come in and get a buy-to-let property to own a surplus of homes so you can make money from it, no, we couldn't possibly think about taking away that tax relief for you until we've outsourced that decision and kicked the can down the road. So when an amendment comes through that adds in the word subject to, members should know that that means deciding nothing. It means that the decision will be made another time, not now. And for those who support what I'm proposing in principle, but want to err on the side of caution and defer to some independent review and consultation process and vote in favour of this amendment, they would be aligning themselves in the vote with those who actively don't want to see this unfair tax relief abolished. So they'd be siding with those who disagree with what they would hopefully agree with on the basis of those principles of fairness that I raised in my opening remarks. So this amendment does kick things down the road, kicks things into the long grass. That's how Deputy Gorse termed it. No, I said kicking the can down the road. Same thing, but slightly different versions. But either or will do, sir. In accepting this amendment, in the midst of that housing crisis, we say to the people of Jersey that we will perpetuate an unfair discrepancy in the tax reliefs we offer to people on the homes they buy, prioritising those who buy more homes than they need to live in so they can make money out of it, at the expense of those who are seeing their mortgage interest tax relief for the homes that they live in and will be working hard to acquire and pay off. That is quite fine to be abolished. We don't need to do any more work on that. They can lose that, but if we're talking about it for investors, oh no, we couldn't possibly. That has to be subject to review and subject to consultation. There is a double standard there, which I seriously ask members to consider, and the prioritisation it shows is one that I suspect would not be very welcome at all. Sir, we received a circular this morning asking members to vote against these amendments, the amendment that I've proposed. And my favourite part in it, in asking us to vote against it, is right at the start, it refers to the background to highlight why it's so important that this can't go ahead now. It says, landlords are already suffering from government intervention in the housing market through A, B, C, D and E. I'll go into what those are, but I I'm going to say the hilarious thing about this is they cite 5 things that haven't actually happened. It says landlords are already suffering from government intervention in the housing market through a recently passed landlord licensing. It doesn't come into force until May next year, so nobody's suffering from that. So, and they're already suffering from proposed rent controls. What rent controls? We don't have any. They're already suffering from proposed open-ended tenancies. We don't have any. They're already suffering from proposed increased red tape and administration in the Housing Minister's white paper, a white paper which as of yet has not been implemented and so has caused no suffering. And lastly, landlords are already suffering from a proposed energy efficiency measures under the carbon neutral roadmap. Again, something that hasn't actually been implemented. So this alleged suffering is entirely fictional. Where there is suffering, sir, are those homeowners who are seeing their tax relief disappeared by the end of next year. That will be gone forever. So I voted against doing that, but we are where we are. But if you want to purchase investment properties to rent out, that tax relief will still exist for you, which is clearly unfair. So by having it come into force in 2026, rather than straight away next year, that gives time for that new residential tenancy law to be in place to protect tenants from no-fault evictions or unfair rent practices. So even by aligning it with the loss of mortgage interest tax relief, you still give that time period for people to adjust and to protect those who apparently the government is worried would suffer as a result of this. So we have a severe housing crisis, and delaying any implementation of action on it in order to outsource our decision-making to independent bodies does not give the signal that it's as relentless a priority as we're told that it is. And so I ask members, if you think that it's unfair to take away a tax relief from one group of people but keep it for the people who arguably need it less, then don't fall for these tactics of stopping the Assembly from making a decision on it and instead subjecting it to a process that's completely beyond the control of members of this Assembly. It is kicking it into the long grass or kicking the can down the road, and I don't think the public would be pleased with us taking that when the situation is so dire. So I ask members to vote against this amendment to the amendment.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment to the amendment? No. Deputy Scott.
Sir, I have sympathy with Deputy Mesick's argument about government's amendment. I don't particularly feel comfortable with suggestions that we agree to his, or at least part of his amendment, subject to the outcome of the Fiscal Policy Panel's review of Jersey's housing market. I'm not even sure what outcome means in this situation. Whilst hearing him speak, it seemed that much of this is about an issue of fairness and consistency. But maybe the trouble is that we're already going in what perhaps is the wrong direction. There was one thing that Deputy Mesick mentioned, which he was talking about businesses and the extent to which they get relief for the acquisition of capital assets. And it did prompt me to just ask, maybe if I can ask the Attorney General now, he knows the answer, whether if a business acquires trading premises, they get any relief on the interest that they might pay for the borrowing for that.
It could be the attorney would needed to have notice of a question of that nature. Are you able to assist?
So the deputy was kind enough to give me some notice.
Then you did give some
notice. Or a few minutes notice anyway. So looking at Article 106A of the Income Taxes Law, that restricts relief for capital allowances to plant and machinery. And unless there's some technical guidance as to the meaning of plant and machinery, which confess I'm not aware of, the answer to the deputy's question is no, it would not be available.
Thank you. So the more I just hear this, the more I think, well, it was I would have preferred mortgage relief hadn't been taken away. I prefer that businesses did have actually the ability to get some sort of deduction for borrowing in terms of their own trading premises. But if you did do that, you would need perhaps to think of some way that should they sell the property, just like with a capital asset, that there's some sort of reimbursement there. So in the long and short of it is I'm not keen on government's amendment, and I'm not keen on Deputy Mezek's amendment either. I think there probably is just a much better way of going about things altogether.
Deputy Tadier.
So I think speaking specifically to the amendment, and it's, I think Deputy Mezek covered it largely and well in his response to the amendment from the Treasury Minister. The first question that has to be asked is why 2027? So if we are in agreement, and I'm not, but if members want to vote for this, they have to answer why is it's got to be done in 2027? The report coming back is next year in 2024. It's not going to take government that long to consider the report. And then to implement it, it should be at the very latest 2026, one would have thought, and this would be consistent with the other changes that are coming in. The next point I suppose to make is that there's nothing to guarantee that the Fiscal Policy Panel who are looking at the housing situation in Jersey will specifically report back on this kind of issue. It may be something that they don't touch on at all. And the question therefore remains, I suppose, is that why is the government not applying this argument to all its positions to do with housing? The government has told us that housing is an area of relentless focus, and it's just brought in significant future regulation to do with licensing, which we know we got lobbied by the Landlord Association, amongst others, on that, or primarily by them, who said, actually, don't do this, it's going to hurt us. We've looked at those arguments and we've already passed that. But the argument could easily have been made, let's not do anything until we've heard back from this report by the Fiscal Policy Panel on housing. So that doesn't really wash as an argument either. And just to reiterate in a slightly different way what I think Deputy Mezek said, so as I'm not repeating it, is that we have actually, there's a strong argument, I would say, in the Jersey context for a tax on second, third, fourth, fifth, 10th, 50th, 100th homes in the island. And that tax could be incremental. It could be that if you have a second home, you pay X amount of tax on it, and that by the time you get to your 50th home, you might pay 50% tax on certain value, whatever that's rateable or what the value of that home is, etc. And that might be something that a future Assembly or government wishes to get to grips with. But we've got actually the opposite situation where we have an incentive here from the current government to actually say, we want you to buy second homes to rent out, and we will give you a tax break if you do that, which is kind of the opposite, which I think of what most right-thinking people in our wider society, whatever their economic situation might be, would instinctively think is the right thing to do. So this is simply about deferring a decision which I think is a very simple political one about fairness, and kicking it down the street, not just till next year, not till the year after, not till 2026, but till 2027, because of this flimsy argument about wanting to hear back from a so-called independent report. I'm afraid doesn't wash with me, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment to the amendment? Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. I just want to say I think it is a shame that Deputy Mezek hasn't accepted the government's amendment. And that's because I do genuinely believe work needs to be done. And one of the elements of the work that needs to be done is about businesses and capital allowances. And whilst I didn't note down exactly what Deputy Mezek said in his opening address, he did talk about kind of businesses not having, I think, and I do apologise if I get this slightly wrong, but it isn't right to give businesses relief on the capital that they invest. But of course, that's exactly what tax systems do throughout the world. If a business takes out a loan to invest in capital, it could be a building business, invests in a new kind of piece of equipment, a new generator, let's say. They can, if they borrow to buy that generator, they can offset the interest from the loan in buying that generator against their tax payments. And so that is exactly why the rationale stands for having landlords, who in theory are businesses, offsetting their mortgage interest payments against their tax. It's exactly the same as works for the rest of the corporate tax system. And he also pointed out that in the comments from the council ministers say they are sympathetic to this, which I think is a wonderful indication that they're saying, yes, we really want to look at this, but we need to do it properly, because we need to make sure that if we move to a system where this interest deduction isn't allowable, that it is only, or very clearly is focused only on landlords. How would that affect those few businesses which are multiple landlords? You know, there are businesses where their business is being a landlord. They rent out dozens, scores of properties. Do we want it to affect them? Do we not want it to affect them? Should they be treated separately from someone like myself, let's say, who's an individual with my wife, a couple who have a couple of small properties that we rent out? And, you know, how does the balance work there? So I think, you know, what we have is a Council of Ministers which is clearly indicated, as it says, its sympathy with the amendment that Deputy Mezek has lodged, so that's a real positive. And then it's just said, look, but we need to make sure we do this right. And we need to make sure one of the ways of getting that is through the housing review by the Fiscal Policy Panel, and also working through that slight entanglement with normal corporate practice of deducting interest against loans on your tax payments. So I think it's the right thing to do. I think, you know, this is one of those areas where it feels like we're all swimming in the same direction. So let's do that. Let's carry on doing together and working on this together. And, you know, the Council of Ministers Amendment is only about a time frame. It's not about saying no. It's not, as many people would say, a wrecking amendment. It's none of those things. So I would strongly support the Council of Ministers amendment to the amendment, because I think it's the right thing to do this in a proper and kind of, not educated, but a proper and diligent way. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Comment of St Mary.
Thank you, sir. And I do have a lot of sympathy with Deputy Mezek's arguments, and I was at one stage pondering even voting with him. But what doesn't seem to be mentioned thus far is the fact that loans are taken out by landlords not just to buy properties, but to maintain them. We are in the throes of imposing on landlords, or recognising landlords may have serious repairs to carry out to their properties. And I am concerned that if they do not have the facilities to do that, they will be forced to sell, which may be good for the housing market in some respects, but not good for the letting market in others. So I am agreeing to support the amendment for that reason alone, so that we perhaps do need more time to work out the implications of the situation should the interest relief be withdrawn sooner rather than later. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment to the amendment? Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. I think we've got a stage here where we hear this a lot. That, you know, we're okay with this, but we just got to, you know, got to take some time. We've got to have some consultation. We've got to get some feedback from the Fiscal Policy Panel. And what occurs to me when this happens, sir, is this phrase, which is, "Oh, come on." We know what's happening here, and we've seen it so many times, and we hear from ministers within the government about, well, you know, there are these consequences. Quick, find me some reasons why I can put an argument together to say this is the extreme position. It could affect somebody who is their main business is owning property and renting out. Well, so you know what? There is the inherent unfairness. I'm trying to stick away from the main debate, although if this I'm trying to stick on the amendment. It's very difficult because of the way they're intrinsically linked. The intrinsic unfairness when removing tax relief from people who are buying their homes at the same time that a government wants people to be more involved with buying their own homes and have more opportunity, but not removing that from those who are investors. You may have two, or it's nice to have 2 or 3 places to rent out. Lovely. You know, we've got an income support system that will probably pay your rent for you as well at the same time. And that's a really handy little system to have. But then you can claim your tax relief. And that is an intrinsic unfairness that needs to be addressed. And the amendment by government seems to say, we'll wait until the report published in 2024. Nothing will be acted on for 3 years. We'll give another year for the consultation and everything to be sorted out, and you've still got a 2-year gap. That's in the next assembly, sir. That's going to cross assemblies. And that is by definition an amendment that is set out to do nothing. And I really would say to members, I go back to that phrase that occurred to me. Oh, come on. Really, what is this for? We cannot, at this one and the same time, be saying to people who are desperately struggling with their mortgages in the homes that they live in, the only home that they have, that we are going to remove your tax relief. While at the same time, when people are investing, okay, but they're getting their mortgage paid effectively from rent, that we'll give you tax relief down that as well. Why our young people, and I am very directly influenced by this, sir, perhaps I should declare it, because I have my children who are desperately trying to rent and paying a significant amount of their income every single month with yearly tenancies that are in no way secure, while the landlord is getting tax relief. Whereas in my home, I'm not going to get that tax relief on my mortgage because I still have a mortgage and we'll have I don't know how many years. And that intrinsic unfairness cannot be kicked down the road. This assembly is at real risk of doing nothing on the real issues that we face on this island. In the name of complex, over-complex, not even complex, but arguments that seem to want to say there are consequences that we don't know about and so therefore we can't do anything at all. So I think the phrase outsourced has been used. This is what we are here for, to make these decisions on the way that we want our island to be, about housing, about the way we give interest relief and the way we don't. We cannot just outsource that in the hope that something will come back and then we can say, well, someone else can make that decision. Government is here to make those decisions now. We've seen already today, sir, that plans are being, not this year, but next year, and papers are being produced. And all the time, I don't know about other members, I get people coming up to me and they're dropping their consistency and say, what's actually happening now then? What's actually going on? And this is another example of that. And so I think one of the unintended consequences may be that by giving interest relief to those who can invest and large investors who have that money to invest and get those mortgages, because once you've got 2 or 3 homes, you might be making money on those and you can invest in some more. You're artificially inflating the market for those who no longer have interest relief. But we're going to wait 3 or 4 years for that before we make any decision. It's going to be too late, sir. It'll be too late because young people will be leaving this island. Young people won't be able to buy anywhere in the next year or two, next 2 or 3 years. But investors will, and they'll get the tax relief to do that, and then young people will be paying most of their income in order to pay rent to carry on and get nowhere. So we need to make some decisions now. Kicking this down the road is not a good decision. And I really urge members to reject this amendment. If you believe that it's fair to carry on the way that we are and carry on with the division between those tax reliefs, then debate that in the main unamended amendment and make your decision on that. But what we're doing is classically taking away from the difficult decision now, and we are here to make those difficult decisions. Let's be honest, sir. If you think that interest relief should be removed for main homeowners and the other ones, then vote on the main amendment. But don't think you can get away with it, sir, in this assembly by simply voting for an amendment that kicks it down the road. I think that's intrinsically wrong, sir. So I urge you to reject the amendment to the amendment. Thank you, sir. I think I've got that right.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment to the amendment? No other member wishes to speak? Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. This really does stick in the throat because I'm having to say I agree with the spirit of the amendment, and I did often agree with Deputy Mezek, but there we go. There's a first for everything. But as I say, we need to have regard to all that is happening at the moment in the housing market. We have to remember timing is everything. There was a recent court judgment on the 3% stamp duty increase for second homes. That judgment referred to the lack of consultation for the sudden insertion of the 3% increase and the unquantified impact it had on the market. This is an example of how an idea, a well-intentioned idea, can have consequences. I am personally looking forward to the Fiscal Policy Panel's commentary. And just in answer to Deputy Tadier saying, oh, I'm not sure if they'll deal with tax, the Fiscal Policy Panel matters include tax because it just so happens to be a fiscal policy. So, sir, what I'm concerned about here in the housing market review, and we should absolutely await their expert observations before lobbing in a tax change that is going to affect housing in Jersey. We must take care with our decisions that are going to impact the housing market. We simply cannot afford to get it wrong. And, sir, we must be measured about this. We must take the right approach at the right time. We cannot quantify the impact of the recent interest rate hikes. Removing the interest relief right now worries me because landlords are likely to pass on this increase. I am sure there'll be a number of landlords out there whose mortgage is now or soon to be more expensive than the rental income they are able to attain. And I emphasize that this is different to the phase out of interest relief for homeowners. Homeowners have known about the phase out of mortgage interest relief, but landlords have not. And for some, the interest relief will be a lifeline. And, sir, this isn't about protecting landlords' investment choices. It is still about protecting the tenant. We don't want to see a mass exodus from the rental market. Tenancies being ended earlier than they might have been. This is bad for tenants. These are people's homes we are talking about. Sir, as I've explained, I agree with the spirit of the amendment. I think we should absolutely take a serious look at tax relief, but now is not the right time to implement such a policy without fully understanding the risk to renters. I'm sure Deputy Mezek may argue that had I brought in rent controls sooner, then the proposal to remove the interest relief wouldn't be a problem. But until my proposals are finalised, I cannot say for certain that we would be able to protect tenants from any shocks that may come from this change. Furthermore, rent controls or rent stabilisation measures, as I prefer to call them, will only be able to deal with existing tenancies. But what about the inflationary impact for new tenancies? The Deputy may say that the government is out of touch with the public, but I'd say the public expect us to take a measured approach. We will not pursue careless policy making. The stakes are simply too high. In response to Deputy Ward's commentary about the government doing nothing, so we're on the verge of launching our £10 million scheme, shared equity scheme, which will assist tens and between, 40 and 60 homeowners, plus assist chains to be unlocked. We've got an Andium home buy scheme, and we've got a massive building programme on the way as well. So this government is helping to solve the housing crisis. So I urge the members to support the Council of Ministers amendment to amendment number 22. I urge members to support us in going away to do this properly.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment to the amendment? No other member wishes to speak? Then I close the debate and I call upon Deputy Gores to respond.
Thank you, sir, and I'm pleased to follow the Housing Minister. I may not have started my comments in the way that he did, but he made, I think, really quite important points. And I think on the one hand, this is portrayed as really a straightforward levelling of the playing field, I think, between homeowners and landlords, but we shouldn't forget underneath all of this, this is about tenants and the provision of properties for tenants and not doing anything which might raise unintentionally the rents that tenants are facing, something I think that my colleagues here over sitting to my physical right would wish to ensure. And one speaker asked for an intervention from the Attorney General about what interest deductibility was available elsewhere within the system. And of course, the Attorney General rightly answered the question as it was phrased. But that question could have been phrased in a totally different way, which I think Deputy Scott was alluding to. Could have been phrased in a different way and would have had a totally different answer, because a mortgage is a different instrument to a loan that a business who was in the business of owning properties might avail themselves of, and the interest deductibility available to that would be different from one on a mortgage. And that is another reason why it is absolutely right that even where we have an aligned interest, we do it appropriately and we do it properly. I have every confidence in the fiscal policy panel. They will not dictate our policy, but they will provide good economic evidence, which, again, my colleagues to my physical right keep asking for. Further good economic data on any number of things. This is something where the government has rightly asked those eminent economists to provide that information, because the housing market that I encounter outside of these doors is one which is stagnant, which is seeing prices go down, is seeing landlords remove themselves from the market. It is not the one that I had or that was intimated by the mover of the original proposition, where we were seeing an increasing number of landlords, an increasing number of buy-to-lets. Certainly the numbers from a tax perspective don't show that. They show that it's held reasonably steady. And we do, it's got to say that, okay, I stand here as the Minister, but if I were to swap my hat and put on the hat of the Deputy for St. St. Mary and St. Peter, I'm sure I've got those the right way around, then at nearly every parish surgery, we are having representations from landlords who are not sure what they are going to do in the coming years, and we must take those representations seriously, and we must listen to what they are telling us. And therefore, even though there might be a great deal of alignment, I would ask that members support the Minister's amendment to do this work properly. And if I may, sir, beg the indulgence, that will mean members voting in this instance with their paw buttons. Thank you.
Do you call for the appel?
I do, sir. Thank you.
Appel is called for. I invite members to return to their seats. The vote is on the amendment to the amendment. I ask the greffier to open the voting. Members have had the opportunity of casting their vote. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The amendment has been adopted, 31 votes pour, 13 votes contre, no abstentions.
We have 13.
Those voting contre, Deputies Southern, Tadier, Luce, Ward, Alves, Mezek, Coles, Porre, Scott, Curtis, Feltham and Kovac.
Well, we now return to the debate on the 22nd Amendment as now amended. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Can you clear the voting screen, please? Deputy Tadier.
Thank you. We'll get the can rolling, I guess. The problem I've got, and I really take exception at, is that we have minister after minister saying they're sympathetic to the underlying aim here, then coming out with arguments against the underlying aim. Because they're saying, oh, there are good reasons not. There are good reasons not to implement the change in mortgage interest relief because it will put the price up of a tenancy for the tenants. And I don't see how that's going to change. If that is the position that they believe is the case, having a review by a fiscal policy panel is not going to change their underlying economic philosophies or politics, is it? So I would like to hear them make an argument as to why we should be supporting this, because it seems to me that actually with the amendment and with their arguments, that why are we wasting the time? Why are we wasting time in an assembly which I think doesn't support home ownership? Because this is the fundamental point. And it's a strange situation to be in, because I was always taught that from a young age, and from watching, following politics, watching Question Time, is that it was an instinctively conservative position to support home ownership. That would make us all conservatives, I think, in the Reform Jersey Party, because we heard Deputy Alves of St Helier saying, actually, she wants more people to own their own homes. I want more people to own their own homes. There's good reasons for that, because you get buy-in to the community, you get buy-in to the island, you don't have to spend loads of money as a government on income support, which never actually really goes to the tenant, it goes to the landlord. And the landlord says, why have I got this extra money in my pocket that government's just given me? Oh, maybe I should go out and buy another property with it, because I've only got 49 and I want to get to the 50th property. And when you hear arguments that are actually very coherent and I think cogent from their own internal logic, from the Deputy Chief Minister, who's also the Sustainable Economics Minister, saying that actually it's a business expense. And being a landlord is just like any other business. So why would we bring in get rid of a business expense which is perfectly legitimate for businesses to claim tax relief on their interest, because that's what they already do. It seems that the starting position isn't one of sympathy and saying actually this is quite a good proposition and we need to look into it. It's one of saying that actually this proposition doesn't work anyway. And that's why you can't help feeling that this is genuinely an attempt to kick the can down the road or to kick the ball into the long grass there. So I'm at a bit of a loss here, because clearly we have an opportunity here. If we genuinely want islanders to stand on their own 2 feet, to be able to buy homes, we have to accept that there are a finite number of homes in Jersey, notwithstanding the ones that might be built at some point. If ministers can actually agree on what gets planning permission and what doesn't get planning permission, what sites are actually for hospitals and what sites are actually for housing, if they can finally agree to that and we get some more housing, we have to accept that if every second, third, fourth, 10th, 20th, 50th, 100th property that is owned in addition to a landlord's own property that they live in, then those are homes that other people can't own. That's simple mathematics. And when we have policies here which actively incentivize landlordship and therefore tenancy, we immediately have that necessary contradiction. And to have a minister standing up and say, actually, we're doing this for the benefit of tenants, that there is no benefit of tenants here, because there is no understanding of basic politics, of economics, when it comes to the relationship between property and the individual who owns it or the individuals who rent in this island. I'll leave the comments there, sir.
Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. Well, like Deputy Tadier, I actually am very much supportive of the principle of fairness and keeping down the cost of living. I can't support this amended proposition. I can't support the concept of rent going up even more and the consequences that has and the knock-on effect for salaries, for everything else that actually is a problem for our economy at the moment. As amended, this is chucking this decisions in the direction of the fiscal policy panel. It might be reassuring to hear that there's confidence in the fiscal policy panel, but again, we're talking about an outcome, whatever that means. I personally have been monitoring some sort of advice. I think the actual advice it's giving in reserve or about reserves is actually very sound. It is worrying how they are being whittled down. and the potential impact on things like the island's credit rating, which has yet to be really kind of explored. But also, there's been these constant forecasts in terms of like what's going to happen with interest rates, and they keep going up. And that's going to have an impact on rents and mortgages too. So I'm afraid I can't support this amended proposition.
Very much. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? No other member wishes to speak. Then I close the debate and call upon Deputy Mezek to respond.
Thank you, sir. Having lost the debate on the amendment, which I'm obviously disappointed by, obviously I could respond with magnanimity, but that's nowhere near as much fun. Sir, I'm obviously extremely disappointed that the amendment has been accepted, because it now means we're actually debating and voting on nothing. This requires literally nothing to happen as a consequence of it, and the insertion of the words subject to mean that we're at the mercy of something completely different, which could go anyway. It's anyone's best guess on it, and a decision will be made at a later date rather than now. So the amended proposition is now completely pointless. I suppose the only positive to take from it is that at least there's some words that can be cited that this moment in history happened in the future. But depending on what that fiscal policy panel says and whether the government accepts it, which of course they don't have to, they haven't accepted what they've said about speculative savings in the government plan, so why should we expect them to accept what they say on this either, then it just means we have that debate again at a future date, but at least the public of Jersey can have it on record who supported doing nothing now and who supported doing something positive. So I suppose vote poor.
Do you call for the appel? Let us call for. Invite members to return to their seats. The vote is on the amendment number 22 as amended. I ask the greffier to open the voting. If members have had the opportunity of casting their vote, then I ask the greffier to close the voting.
You press the button to vote.
The amendment has been adopted. 33 votes for, 12 votes contra, no abstentions.
I tried to change my vote, I don't think you closed the vote.
Those voting contra, the connotables of St Clement, Grouville and St Juan, deputies Luce, Farnham, Osoph, Scott, Rose Binet, Jean, Howell, Barbara Ward and Wilson.
Very well. The next item to be debated is the 25th Amendment from the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel. And I ask the greffier to read the amendment.
Paragraph A. After the words Article 9(2)A of the law, insert the words, except that total estimate for 2024 AMPO duties should be decreased by 2,090,000 by freezing the AMPO duties for spirits, wine, cider and beer, with the relevant figures in Appendix 2, Summary Table 1, updated in line with the following table and subsequent figures updated accordingly. Paragraph H, after the words of the report, insert the words, except that to accommodate a drop in state's income caused by freezing the AMPO duties for spirits, wine, cider and beer, A, the head of expenditure for the Central Reserve shall be reduced by 1,045,000. B, the head of expenditure of the Cabinet Office shall be reduced by 721,000. And C, the head of expenditure for the Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture shall be reduced by 324,000. Paragraph L, after paragraph K, insert the following new paragraph L. L, to agree that from 2025, the hospitality sector should be supported through a separate lower alcohol duty rate or receive a rebate or similar measure to mitigate any future increases in alcohol duty, and to direct the Minister for Treasury and Resources to bring forward the necessary legislative and administrative changes for debate by the Assembly during 2024 and redesignate the existing paragraph L as paragraph M.
Sir, could I take the chance to declare an interest?
Yes, certainly, Deputy.
Thank you. I run a vodka and gin distillery, and therefore AMPO excise duties are part of a product, but I don't believe there is a direct financial benefit here for two reasons, which I can detail if members want to know why I don't think this is direct.
Well, I think it's a matter you've declared that you have that interest. I think it's for you to declare if you think there is a direct interest. And if you don't, then you've declared it, and that's the position. Yes, sir.
Likewise, I'm involved in hospitality. Thank you.
Yes. Do you have a direct interest in the outcome of this debate?
It's very vague, sir. 4.5% is not, it's not going to change my world.
And I think, Deputy Farnham, you're in the same position.
Likewise, sir, I, as I always do, sir, I have an interest. I work currently as a consultant to a business as a licensed premises, sir, but I don't believe there is a direct pecuniary interest.
I think working as a consultant is simply one consults on the business. It's not a direct financial interest in the imposition or otherwise of a... Yes, Deputy.
And similarly, I have a family
I'm sorry.
I have a family business in hospitality.
Is a direct financial interest in the outcome of this debate?
No, similarly with the rest.
Very much. Yes. So who's proposing the amendment?
Sir, the Economic and International Affairs panel is.
Yes.
Sir, at this time of year, it is important to send the message that islanders should drink responsibly. Whatever the time of year and whatever services government wishes to deliver, I'm sure the States Assembly agrees it is important that government imposes taxes and duties within our community responsibly too. The Government Plan 2024 to 2027 originally proposed to increase alcohol duty by 8.9% and fuel duty by 10.9% at a time when many businesses still are trying to get back on track following the pandemic and are beleaguered by increasing costs. I thank the Council of Ministers for accepting the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel's amendment to freeze fuel duty. This amendment proposes to freeze alcohol duty in order to provide particular support particularly to the hospitality sector, as well as the island's economy more generally. While the panel thanks the government for accepting in principle that it needs to restrain its desire to increase alcohol duty at the rate it originally proposed in the government plan, the panel does not consider now to be the time for half measures. Sorry. A blog produced by government shows economic productivity shrinking in all sectors in real terms, except in the parts of the finance industry that benefit from the increased borrowing rates. The panel has received submissions that indicate an increase in alcohol duty will have detrimental impact upon the island's economy, predominantly through placing an unacceptable burden upon the hospitality sector. States members may well remember the poor weather we have had during the summer, and even worse around the time of Storm Ciarán. Hospitality businesses still are trying to stabilise after the wrecking ball thrown by that, as well as by the COVID pandemic. And they have particularly suffered during a year when the summer and autumn weather were poor for business. Too many of them are now operating with reduced hours owing to a lack of staff. That is affecting their ability to trade profitably too. Turning to part 3 of the panel's amendment, this proposes that the Minister for Treasury and Resources brings forward a means by which a separate alcohol duty rate or rebate could be provided to the hospitality sector in the future. Having discussed the topic with the Jersey Hospitality Association, the panel understands that the imposition of duty at the point of import or production has a compounding effect on the end price of the product. This leads to significant differences in the pricing of alcohol served on premises and off premises or bought in shops, and impacts negatively upon the hospitality business and both local and visiting consumers. The panel is aware of the public health arguments for duties on alcohol and understands it to be Government of Jersey policy to increase them. Having considered the basis for government's policy in this respect, the panel considers inadequate analysis has been carried out to establish an indisputable connection between raising alcohol duty in the island and improvement of islanders' health. Nor does there appear to have been a considered evaluation of the economic impact of increasing alcohol duty at this time and its consequential impact on islanders' well-being. Further review of the policy is needed, noting the Jersey Hospitality Association's views that any increase in alcohol duty will likely increase off-licence and duty-free sales, further pushing people to drink lower quality products off-licence or duty-free products within unregulated environments, a point also raised by Randalls Jersey. Statistics produced by government, to which government itself have referred, need careful examination as they appear to support this view. Binge drinking has remained constant over the last 7 years, despite successive rises in alcohol duty and a significant reduction in imports of beers and spirits. The panel also heard from the Institute of Directors that the plan infers that duties on alcohol and fuel serve to address the health of islanders and address environmental issues. Whilst we recognise that these are understandable reasons, there has been little collaboration with industry to assess the impact on business. The Jersey Hospitality Association has expressed a concern that the Council of Ministers is not operating in a joined-up way. The panel is mindful alcohol duty has been frozen in the United Kingdom in its autumn budget, with a Brexit pubs guarantee that duty on a pint of beer is always lower than in UK shops. This has been welcomed by the UK's hospitality industry. Unfortunately, there currently is no mechanism in the way that alcohol duty currently is levied in Jersey that can support a distinction in the rates of duty imposed on alcohol to be consumed on premises or off premises, other than possibly beer bought in kegs. Hospitality businesses rarely have the purchasing power of supermarkets and wholesalers and have the additional cost of leasing and running their establishments and paying serving and catering staff, as well as purchasing their supplies through intermediaries. All of this leads to there being a significant difference in the cost of consuming alcohol provided by hospitality businesses and buying it off licence and duty-free. The Jersey Hospitality Association has submitted that over the past 10 years, duty rises have increased in Jersey by 51.4% over the last 10 years, compared to 12% in the UK, making Jersey 37% more expensive than in the UK. Amongst the significant increases that the hospitality has had to endure when many businesses have yet to recover from the pandemic, 8.76% inflation has increased prices generally. Condor has announced an 18.7% increase in freight costs next year. The Jersey Hospitality Association has referred to the minimum wage having increased over 26% since 2021, and knock-on effects on other wages, and that the industry also is set to see electricity go up by 12% and water by 11% from January too. Many of these increased costs are a general problem for the island's economy, along with the challenges of seeking staff in an island that is seeing depopulation owing to the costs of housing and living in the island. Jersey's hospitality industry has experienced a number of high-profile business collapses recently. The connectivity that the island has through its air and sea links is very much linked to its visitor numbers and the sustainability of the island's hospitality industry offering. A more expensive offering by the hospitality industry also could negatively impact on other industries seeking to entertain clients or to attract staff. Sir, the United Kingdom, where alcohol duty now is frozen, is one of the many places with which our hospitality sector has to compete for visitor trade. It also is a key source of visitors to the island who are familiar with most of the products sold in the island and served here, and who can easily compare prices with those in the UK. The panel has heard from the Jersey Hospitality Association that the Treasury informed them it had not done any modelling to examine the additional impact of the proposed duty rises on Jersey's hospitality industry. Nor is the panel aware of work to consider the contribution of increased duties to price inflation in the island generally. Conversely, government substance abuse strategy needs to be reviewed in the light of local statistics to ensure the measures in it can be productive in curbing excessive alcohol consumption without harming the island's hospitality industry and the wider economy unnecessarily. Government appears to be addicted to taking money out of the economy through the imposition of duties, while having done little in the way of delivery in its promised value for money reviews. It is proposing to impose alcohol duty without fully considering the health of the hospitality sector, the potential health benefits of encouraging a culture of moderate alcohol consumption on regulated premises where excessive alcohol drinking can be discouraged, does not appear to have been adequately explored by government, along with alternative ways of imposing duty to encourage such an improved alcohol consumption culture. It is time for the government to start changing patterns that risk encouraging a continued downward economic spiral in the absence of thorough analysis of the purported health benefits. I therefore urge States members to accept the panel's amendment to freeze alcohol duty in its entirety and to direct the Minister for Treasury and Resources to bring forward changes to the way alcohol duty is charged to better support the hospitality industry. Thank you, sir.
Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Well, there is an amendment to the amendment proposed by the Council of Ministers, and I ask the greffier to read that amendment.
In paragraph L, substitute the sum 2,090,000 with 1,033,000. Substitute the word freezing with reducing. Delete the words and subsequent figures updated accordingly, and substitute the table as follows. In paragraph 2, substitute the word freezing with reducing. Substitute the sum 1,045,000 with 1,033,000, and delete the subsequent subparagraphs B and C. Paragraph 3. In paragraph 3, substitute the new paragraph L and with the following L, to agree that the Government of Jersey should publish a broader review of alcohol policy and consider what additional support could be provided for the hospitality sector and the island's small spirits producers.
Yes, who's speaking?
Thank you, sir. The Council of Ministers fully appreciates the motivation behind the scrutiny panel's amendment to freeze alcohol duty and the current challenges faced by the hospitality industry, and they are well known and documented and acknowledged by all ministers. This is, of course, when we first lodged the government plan, it was the main reason why we proposed increases to alcohol duty at 2 percentage points below the June RPI figure of 10.9 to get to 8.9. It's also, of course, why duty was frozen on alcohol in 2022. But as a government, we are obliged to consider all aspects of a freeze to alcohol duty and not simply the financial implications for businesses, albeit they are important parts of our consideration. We know that this proposed freeze would be welcomed by our restaurant and pub traders, but it unfortunately ignores the health consequences of the well-documented high levels of alcohol consumption across our community. The consistent advice from health officials is to increase the duty on alcohol at least in line with inflation to maintain its cost in real terms. Earlier this year, health officials published the Alcohol Profile 2022, providing evidence of the impact alcohol has on our community, our health system, and of course our justice system. And contrary to the assertions that we may hear during the course of this debate, and we have heard outside of this place from some members, the evidence for the impact of price on alcohol consumption is extremely robust. Members will see from the footnote in the report to this amendment, which summarises 112 studies on the subject. And it's not possible, having reviewed that, to deny the link between price and consumption. I also wish to briefly emphasise the simplicity with which the current excise duty system is administered for both the government and for businesses. And to highlight the level of complication that will be introduced when a bespoke rate or rebate system is introduced. And I say will and when, because the department have committed under the instruction of ministers to do that work. In advance of that work being undertaken, therefore ministers think a reduction to 4.5% is a reasonable approach. We are prudent in our approach to finances, and we are obliged, of course, to consider the effect of a freeze on public finances. The panel's proposal, as they say, would cost 2.1 million, and therefore, as I've said, ministers have come to what they believe is an acceptable compromise position and proposes a duty increase of 4.5 rather than the original 8.9, which is below the relevant inflation figure of 10.1. Sorry, 10.9. This position balances public health, public finances, and costs to businesses. And therefore, sir, I move the amendment to the amendment. Thank you.
Is the amendment to the amendment seconded? Deputy Scott.
Sir, I would like to thank the Council of Ministers for considering the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel's amendment to freeze alcohol duty. The amendment the Council of Ministers is proposing to the panel's amendment nevertheless seeks to increase alcohol duty by 4.5%, in other words, a half measure, that the Council of Ministers has suggested as a compromise, enabling the Treasury to increase its revenue from alcohol consumption by £1 million, while indicating the increase as a way of supporting the hospitality sector and curbing excessive alcohol consumption, which has proven health consequences. So the Economics and International Affairs Panel does not seek to produce policy. If there is a conflict in economic and health policy, it needs to be resolved responsibly. The panel has examined on behalf of states members the evidence submitted to support both our amendment and the Council of Ministers amendment. The economic risks and likely health benefits of accepting the Council of Ministers amendment need to be considered by the States Assembly with due weight given to both. However, hopefully, this speech will explain why the panel has not accepted the Council of Ministers amendment. Firstly, The panel does not wish to trivialise the health consequences of excessive drinking, nor do the hospitality representatives with whom we have spoken. It is important that the problem and the known concerns associated with alcohol consumption in Jersey are adequately addressed and appropriately managed. Without wishing to encroach on the work of the Health and Social Security Scrutiny Panel, the Economics and International Affairs Panel has considered the reports referenced in the report accompanying the Council of Ministers amendment, as well as government's substance abuse strategy. It also has considered the statistics produced by government in its alcohol profile of last year. In the limited time the panel has had to consider these reports, it has found evidence to suggest raising alcohol duty could be the wrong answer to the wrong question, and one that could have lasting damage for the health of the island's hospitality industry. The World Health Organization's 2022 report and the 2009 report referenced by the Council of Ministers are not specific to the ongoing problem in Jersey of excessive alcohol consumption and could be considered as research on an international scale. They also focus more on pricing than the connection between alcohol duty rates and the impact on health issues. The pricing of alcohol and its effect on consumption is a complex issue. It should be remembered that in Jersey, the pricing of alcohol is inflated by freight costs, already being seriously inflated, and relatively high business operating costs before duty further inflates alcohol pricing even more. One submission to the panel has pointed out government's excise statistics show that dutiable beer imports into Jersey have dropped from 14 million litres in 1995 to just 8.3 million litres at the end of 2022, a decrease of 41%. Dutiable spirits imports have also decreased from 360,000 litres to 168,000 litres in that time, a decrease close to 50%. Despite this, the 2022 alcohol profile found that alcohol consumption in Jersey remains one of the highest of OECD countries. One of its key findings was that in 2022, around a third of people in Jersey reported binge drinking at a frequency of monthly or more. This proportion was similar over the last 7 years. It goes on to state, this same report, that in the last 10 years, the price of alcohol has risen by 35%. These results suggest rises in alcohol pricing are not operating as a deterrent for people to stop drinking immoderately. The Council of Ministers does not appear to have investigated in depth the extent to which successive alcohol duty increases simply are increasing duty-free sales. Indeed, the government allows the ports of Jersey to profit from duty-free outlets to fund its own operations at the expense of the island's hospitality and duty-paying retail industry. Furthermore, the World Health Organization report, to which the Council of Ministers amendment also refers, points out that increases in taxation may not be distributed in onward pricing in a way that addresses the objectives of policymakers. Quoting from that report, the prices of cheaper alcohol preferred by heavier drinkers may increase by less than the prices of more expensive alcohol preferred by moderate drinkers. This means, I'm still quoting from the report, that moderate drinkers may be effectively being used by retailers to subsidise lowered prices or smaller price increases for heavier drinkers. On the basis of the evidence provided to the panel, raising alcohol duty appears too blunt a tool for the purpose of achieving government's health outcomes, Work needs to be done to address this localised issue using the information reports and statistics that have been undertaken in Jersey to be sure of productivity in this area. In the meantime, raising alcohol duty risks compromising or damaging the island's economic productivity, particularly in the hospitality industry. At a time when the government could be considering collaborating with the hospitality industry to help promote responsible drinking, the Jersey Hospitality Association has expressed the concern that the government appears to be penalising hospitality businesses for still being in business, rather than focusing on helping them to thrive. In this respect, the Council of Ministers has submitted their amendment would add just 2 pence to a standard pint of beer, glass of wine, or single pour spirits. This does not take into account evidence supplied to the panel of a difference in pricing impact between duty on alcohol when sold in a supermarket and when served in a restaurant. In the case of a restaurant, the panel has heard that intermediaries in the supply chain charge in percentage terms on the supply of alcoholic products inclusive of duty. A restaurant does not have the advantage of size and volume of sales as a supermarket. It also has to bear additional costs to serve the product. This leads to a compounding effect for a restaurant every time alcohol duty is raised. In paragraph 3 of its amendment, the Council of Ministers seeks to replace the panel's proposal for a separate lower alcohol rate for the hospitality sector with a proposal that it publish a broader review of alcohol policy and consider what additional support could be provided for the hospitality sector and the island's small spirits producers. Sir, the panel accepts that the way in which alcohol duty currently is imposed in Jersey would cause difficulties or at least challenges, I should say, in creating a bespoke rate for those in the hospitality industry. However, the current mechanism differs from the UK in terms of pricing and categories, and there could be a case for making it more consistent with the mechanism that is used in the United Kingdom. The government's amendment has no end date for producing a broader review of alcohol policy and the additional support for the hospitality sector and the island's small spirits producers. It should not take an amendment to the government plan to initiate a broader review of the alcohol policy. In fact, I'm surprised, given the reports and the statistics that have been supplied to us by government, that this has not happened already. The Minister for the Economy committed to publish a new visitor economy strategy sustainable economy, I should say. So, committed to publish a new visitor economy strategy in November, which the panel has yet to see, and also to review the tourism and licensing law this year. The panel has not seen anything in this respect either. This does raise concerns whether the policies are being developed in silos, and whether the problems identified by the Jersey Hospitality Association regarding the structure by which alcohol duty is imposed by government at point of production, whether that might not have been addressed already. If so, the major concern expressed by the Jersey Hospitality is that the Council of Ministers is not operating in a joined-up way. Promising another consultation and another policy is likely to be as impactful for the hospitality industry than getting on with meaningful changes to ensure that alcohol duty does not create an excessive and unfair burden on its customer offering. Sir, I've requested that the government take the vote on its amendment in parts so that this item is voted on separately should the Council Ministers wish to continue with this part of the amendment. In conclusion, sir, the hospitality industry isn't looking for a half measure from government to assist it. It is looking for a full measure. I encourage the States Assembly to support an outright freeze on alcohol duty, while the government produces the work anticipated by Part 3 of the main proposition, therefore to reject the government's amendments and to support the panel's amendment in its entirety.
David Scott, which parts are you asking for that be voted on separately? All 3 paragraphs voted separately, or?
So this is a speech on the amendment by government.
No, you've requested they vote on separately. It's a matter for
Yes.
It's a matter for the minister whether he will do so. But I'm asking what your request is.
It's that part 3 is...
So 1 and 2 taken together, and then part 3 voted on separately.
If the...
Yes. That will be a matter for the minister, of course, when the
Indeed.
time comes. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment to the amendment? No other member wishes to speak? Deputy Bezic.
Thank you, sir. I think I'll speak very briefly on this, but to say that I and my colleagues will be opposing the amendment to this amendment and supporting the amendment of the scrutiny panel, hopefully unamended. Members, I think, will have received correspondence from the Jersey Hospitality Association on this very subject. I've certainly made the effort to try to speak to them as much as I can to understand their positions, and I'm aware of the wider context as well that hospitality is facing in Jersey. And I haven't previously, in my years as a States member, prioritised focusing on this issue, because the raising of alcohol duty is something that we do debate pretty much every year, and it's not one that I've ever gone out of my way to draw attention to or to raise amendments on. But I'm making an exception this time because I'm actually extremely concerned about the situation that the Hospitality Association finds, the Jersey hospitality industry finds itself in, and that their association, I think, so well adumbrates their concerns on. And this is highlighted recently by some notable losses to the industry. In particular, sir, a nightclub announced that it would be closing in a few months' time, which I think for those who enjoy that kind of nightlife in Jersey is a much bigger disaster than I think people are letting on, because of what lack of diversity it will leave in its place by not having that particular venture. And the association that speaks up for that industry has described a perfect storm of lots of issues that are hurting them right now. Some of that includes work permit issues, which are obviously nothing to do with this specific debate. The pressure that they face for wage inflation for their workers, and much of that inflation, let's not forget, is caused by the housing crisis and more workers struggling to make ends meet in those kind of jobs, and so needing to be paid more. Otherwise, they just go somewhere else, and we know hospitality and other industries are struggling with that too. And then to throw on top of that, increase in alcohol duty, which will inevitably work its way to consumers who are seeing ever-growing costs. Members, I think, will probably get annoyed when I say this, but I remember my shock when I bought the first pint in Jersey for £5, thinking what a rip-off it is. I'm sure some members can imagine their shock when it was much lower levels than that. And there are places that I frequent now that I've been going to for nearly 15 years, that you are looking at upwards of £6 for a pint, and that is putting off people going out and enjoying themselves. It's making those industries suffer. It's forcing some of them to consider their viability at all. And I, for one, am very worried about what we risk losing if we put further pressure on that industry. How many really special bars and restaurants are there in Jersey that many of us have such happy memories of going to with friends and family, celebrating special occasions or what have you, places that really add to the vibrancy of our, not just our economy, but our social lives as well, that would be a greater loss than you could quantify if they did go. So one notable nightclub is going. That's going to, I think, upset a lot of people who like that particular venue because of the type of music it provides that you don't necessarily get in other venues. That one in particular is 3 levels, so you've got a choice even in that one, and not many other places provide for that. If we lose more of those kinds of ventures, I fear that we end up on a slippery slope where Jersey becomes a less desirable place to live and work because of losing that vibrancy in our hospitality industry. And I have to say, sir, looking at the report for the government's amendment to this, how quickly they go into it. It's the third sentence into their report, I think, where they refer to about their measures apparently being more fiscally prudent than an across-the-board freeze, which does not take into consideration the known concerns associated with alcohol consumption in Jersey. And I really don't think that argument is a done deal, that the way you want to solve greater alcohol dependency and substance use in Jersey is just by making it more expensive in our bars and restaurants. I simply don't buy that. In fact, I think it can have severely harmful unintended consequences, because the price at which you can purchase cheap and strong alcohol in off-licences is less than you can get it in a pub or a bar, where at least you'll have staff members keeping an eye on you, or hopefully you'll be with friends or family as well, keeping an eye on you as well and looking out for you. So I'm not convinced that that is a justifiable reason for increasing alcohol duty, and would much prefer that if we were to have an approach on dealing with people consuming alcohols at high levels that is clearly bad for their health, that we tackled that through a completely different strategy, rather than simply pumping up the price of alcohol in bars and restaurants here, which makes it harder for people to go out to enjoy that. It's worse for our economy, and also it affects our social lives, where people are less likely to want to go out and enjoy those special occasions with people, not to mention, sir, the knock-on impacts that has on our arts and culture as well, because of venues being more expensive for people to get drinks when they're enjoying some live music or another kind of event in hospitality venues here, sir. So I would ask members to reject the amendment from the government, which attempts to portray itself as a compromise, but I think goes very quickly into a nonsensical argument on the health effects of the cost of alcohol that don't, I think, give consideration to the broader context on this. And on this instance, to take heed of the words that we've had from the representatives of Jersey's Hospitality Association, who are deeply concerned about the perfect storm that their industry is facing, and hope, sir, that if we can do at least something to support those businesses, that we won't lose any more of them, when we have had in very recent weeks 2 very high-profile examples of ventures that are being lost, both local, both interesting and different compared to other ventures in that same industry, because you don't know what you got till it's gone, and there may be more to follow otherwise. And so I feel strongly that the states should reject the government's amendment and support the panel's amendment unamended.
Very much. Colin Talbot, St Mary.
Thank you, sir. That very brief point, if I may. I thank the Minister for agreeing to take part 3 as a separate item, but I wonder if you could clarify what he means by publishing a broad review of alcohol policy, what that entails. I say that in the context of the Economic Affairs Scrutiny Panel some years ago, having conducted a very in-depth review of the licensing laws, which I suggest do need to be taken into account hand in hand with alcohol policy. As Deputy Messick has mentioned, there are many points raised, which we raised, emphasising the social benefits of drinking in controlled environments rather than at home, and could he simply therefore advise whether, in referring to alcohol policy, he's also has in mind whether licensing laws will come into the equation, as they don't seem to be referred to in the government plan elsewhere. Thank you.
Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. And really, I'm here to speak in the capacity of Assistant Chief Minister with responsibility for modernisation and digital, as of course the unamended proposition significantly affects the budget of that department. I would urge members to support the Council of Ministers amendment to the amendment. It proposes a pragmatic near-term step to support the cost of alcohol alongside greater increased income tax thresholds, whilst not cutting the budget of departments that ultimately will deliver change that this Assembly wants to see. As Assistant Minister for Sustainable Economic Development, though, I firmly do believe we need a rethink on alcohol tax policy, not least because there are hidden inequalities within those schemes. Members will find if they price the per unit alcohol of different category classes, there can be a 3-fold difference between classes. And you might think that is, one may think that is somewhat discriminatory on drinking habits and preferences. But it is indeed impossible right now to differentiate between on and off trade, despite the fact that many of us would like to see our direction like that to support our hospitality industry. To achieve that change, we will need to improve, upgrade or replace our systems. And the current system called CESA, used by Customs and Excise, makes it in essence impossible to differentiate. Now I raise that because it will be much harder for us to make the rapid change that this Assembly wants to see to support the industry, and having spoken with the Jersey Hospitality Association, who want to see far more radical plans in a freeze, it will be very hard to make that change if we cut the budget of modernisation and digital, which plays a design, leadership and delivery role for digital systems across government. Now, sir, proposed cuts to the Cabinet Office are a repeated theme in amendments to this government plan. And I feel perhaps maybe we need to do a better job of communicating the role and function of individual departments within this larger department. It is a work of modernisation and digital to serve other government departments. For example, paying for licensing, for operating systems, for email, for specialist software, for running data centres, for running the government website, for running the service desk, for hosting specific applications and the likes. After all, a digital department does not serve itself. So we need to find a balance in this government plan whilst being ambitious for reform for the hospitality industry in 2024. And so for my part, we need a team in modernisation and digital ready to help and deliver this, as well as other reforms that we expect to see to help benefit citizens, islanders and our wider economies in the near time.
Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. And I'm pleased to say, to hear the Deputy Mezek has been speaking to the Jersey Hospitality Association. They're an organisation that I speak to on an extremely regular basis, almost daily, very often. So I am highly aware of the difficulties that the hospitality sector is going through at the moment and will continue to go through for the whole of this year. It's going to be a very difficult year for hospitality. They are suffering at the end of the day from the long tail of COVID. And you know, that is a reality. And also Brexit, because again, one of the difficulties we have in attracting people to the island has been caused by the UK government and their choice of how they chose to enable Brexit. But I want to focus, particularly after speaking to, hearing from Deputy Curtis just now, Deputy Alex Curtis, I really want to focus on the paragraph, part 2 of the amendment, which is the bit where the panel, in its, I don't believe it's wisdom at all, the panel has chosen to actually say, take the money from here, take the money from there, take the money from there. So they want the Central Reserve, where they could have said the whole thing from the Central Reserve, but they chose not to, so that's 1.045 million. But then the Cabinet Office, they've decided, just because they don't like the idea of a Cabinet Office, they've decided to say that there should be £721,000 taken from there. Deputy Curtis has just very clearly explained why that will actually hinder the development of new system of taxation on alcohol, because we will have less money to spend on the digital systems that will be needed to bring in a system which has taxation on the on-trade and taxation on the off-trade, which I believe is where we really need to get to in order to do it properly. So the panel's own amendment makes it more difficult to achieve what the amendment wants to do. But then the bit that I am smarting from, sir, which is the head of expenditure for the Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture, which doesn't exist anymore, shall be reduced by £324,000. This is yet again another attack by the chair of the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel on investment in our economy. It is clear that the chair of the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel does not wish us to invest in the economy. And sir, I would like to put in context what Jersey does with regard to the economy and investment in the economy, because compared to other jurisdictions, sir, we are a long way behind. Sir, Deputy Ward, Robert Ward's recent excellent proposition about the classification of the functions of government, possibly one of the most boringly titled propositions, but actually one of the most important that we have seen over the past few years. The report to his proposition from 2019, I'm guessing it was 2019, was published at the end of November. And one of the most interesting parts of that report is Appendix 3, where it highlights and compares the investment that Jersey makes in different parts of government with the investment made by similar or relevant jurisdictions. So it compares Jersey's expenditure to that of the UK, France, Iceland, Ireland, and Luxembourg. Obviously, Iceland being similar size, or as close as we can get within the OECD, 350 to 400,000 people there. Luxembourg being a similar small jurisdiction, but obviously the UK and France being close by and relevant. So, in terms of economics, the share of government expenditure the UK spent in 2021 on economics was 12%. France was 11.6%. Iceland, 12.2%. Ireland, 12.6%. And Luxembourg, 12.6%. That was the share of government expenditure put into investment in the economy, so that they have thriving economies. Basically, all around the 12% mark. Jersey, 6.8%. Almost half the amount. And that was a COVID year. So there was increased spending from Jersey into the economy. Now, sir, with an overall budget for financial services and sustainable economic development of about £40 million, that is less than 4% of government expenditure is invested in the economy. And yet the chair of the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel wishes to reduce it even more because she does not want to see investment in the economy in Jersey, sir, in my view. And this is borne out by other propositions that the chair has made in, I believe, in her own name, with regard to defunding other elements of investment in our economy, notably the visitor economy, sports, Jersey business, and others, sir. So that is why, in my view, the amendment that the Treasury Minister has put forward is vastly better than the amendment that the scrutiny panel have put forward, because it gives the freedom to the Treasury Minister to choose where the money is taken from. It does not hold the hand of the Economy Minister and of the Treasury Minister and force him to do so, sir, to take it from the economy budget. It gives a freedom around that, sir. I am here because I want to champion Jersey's economy. I am here because we need to invest in our economy, and I think it is such a shame that the two people on the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel feel that not investing our economy is the way forward, and that is how Jersey will end up doing more economically, because it's not correct, sir. It is deeply wrong that they think that way, and there is no rationale behind it. So, sir, for that reason, I suggest and ask members to reject, or to no, to vote for the government amendment here, sir, because then the Treasury Minister will have full freedom as to where the money is taken, and he will not necessarily just attack the economy budget in the way that the chair of the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel has. Thank you, sir.
Actually,
Sir, could I just ask a question of the Attorney General, please?
well, firstly, will you stand up, please,
Sorry.
Deputy? I was at the point of inviting the adjournment, but it may be that if you ask the question, the Attorney can consider it overnight and advise the Assembly in the morning, gives the Attorney more time. What's the question?
Am I right in thinking that the Treasurer, the Minister for Treasury, has got the right to adjust transfers, the proposed transfers in the government plan?
Does the Treasury Minister have the right to adjust transfers in the proposed government plan, is the question. I imagine it's a matter of interpretation. It could be that the Minister could himself answer. Was that your question, Deputy?
Yes, sir.
Is the adjournment proposed?
Yes, sir.
Before we adjourn, Deputy Ward, I've noted on the emails that someone has filed a revised answer to a written question 481. I therefore am not going to do anything about it unless you tell me that it still doesn't meet the...
No, sir, it's got a total now, so thank you, sir.
Okay.
I don't know how you did it, but well done. Thank you.
Very well. The Assembly stands adjourned until 9:30 tomorrow morning.